What if Tywin Lannister was publicly executed for treason by King Robert? Let's explore the depths of it in the video. Robert Baratheon sits upon the Iron Throne, the twisted metal cutting into his back, even through his leather and mail. The smell of smoke still drifts through the Red Keep's great hall, carried on the morning breeze that filters through the high windows. 3 days have passed since the sack of King's Landing, and the taste of victory has turned bitter in his mouth. The great doors swing open with a thunderous crash. Ned Stark strides into the throne room, his grey eyes blazing with a fury Robert has never seen in his foster brother. Behind him, 2 northern soldiers carry a litter draped in white cloth. The fabric is stained with blood, and the shapes beneath are small. Too small. "Your Grace," Ned says, his voice cutting through the morning air like a blade. He does not kneel. The soldiers set the litter down before the Iron Throne, and Ned pulls back the cloth with shaking hands. Robert's stomach lurches. Princess Rhaenys lies still and pale, her silver hair matted with blood. Beside her, the infant Prince Aegon's skull is caved in, his tiny body broken. Between them, Elia Martell's face is barely recognizable, her dark eyes staring sightlessly at the vaulted ceiling. "This is what your new kingdom is built upon," Ned declares. His voice echoes in the vast hall. The murder of children, the rape of innocent women. Robert grips the arms of the Iron Throne until his knuckles go white. The hatred he feels for all things Targaryen wars with something else, something that feels like shame. They were dragon spawn, Ned. Rhaegar's children. They would have grown up to challenge my rule. "They were babes!" Ned's shout reverberates off the stone walls. "She was an innocent woman of dawn. Where is the honor in this butchery?" The throne room falls silent, except for the distant cry of ravens outside the windows. Robert studies his oldest friend, the man who helped him win the crown. Ned's face is set like stone, but his hands tremble with rage. Behind him, more northern soldiers file into the hall, their faces grim and disapproving. "I did not order this," Robert says, though the words sound hollow even to his ears. Tywin Lannister acted on his own. Then call him to account for it. The voice that interrupts belongs to Jon Arryn. The aging lord of the Eyrie enters the throne room with measured steps, his face carefully neutral. He approaches the Iron Throne with the practiced ease of a man who has navigated court politics for 40 years. "Your Grace," Jon Arryn says, inclining his head respectfully. "Lord Stark, perhaps we should discuss this matter in private." Ned whirls on the hand of the king. "There is nothing private about this slaughter. Look at them, Lord Arryn. Look at what your king's allies have done in his name." Jon Arryn's pale blue eyes flick to the bodies on the litter, then back to Robert. "The Lannisters proved their loyalty when it mattered most, Your Grace. Lord Tywin brought 12,000 swords to your cause when the war hung in the balance. After sitting in Casterly Rock for a year, while better men bled and died," Ned snaps. He waited to see who would win before choosing a side. Robert rises from the Iron Throne, the metal scraping behind him. He descends the steps slowly, his boots echoing on the stone. When he reaches the bottom, he stands before the litter, staring down at the broken bodies. For a moment, Robert is lost in those thoughts. The idea of having a son like Prince Aegon might have been. A boy with silver hair and purple eyes who would have grown up to hate everything Robert stands for. The child would have been raised on stories of his father's heroism, his grandfather's madness, and Robert's rebellion against their line. But the infant's face is peaceful in death, unmarked except for the terrible wound that killed him. He looks like any other babe, innocent and small. "The realm needs unity," Jon Arryn continues. His voice is measured, reasonable. "Lord Tywin has a daughter of marriageable age. A union between House Baratheon and House Lannister would secure the West and provide the crown with the gold it needs to rebuild. Ned's face darkens further. You would reward these butchers with a royal marriage? I would secure the realm, Jon Arryn replies calmly. Cersei Lannister is beautiful, young, and fertile. She could give the king many sons. Robert thinks of Cersei Lannister, 13 years old, with golden hair and green eyes that remind him too much of her father's calculating gaze. The thought of bedding Tywin's daughter makes his skin crawl, but he has always known his marriage would be a political arrangement. The Lannisters have gold, Jon Arryn presses. The crown's coffers are nearly empty after the war. We need their wealth to feed the small folk and pay our debts. Ned steps forward, his grey eyes boring into Robert's. What does it profit a man if he gains the whole world but loses his soul? You wanted the throne to bring justice to the realm, Robert. Here is your first test. The words hit Robert like a physical blow. He remembers the fury that drove him to rebellion, the rage that consumed him when Rhaegar Targaryen allegedly kidnapped and raped Lyanna. He had sworn to bring justice to the Seven Kingdoms, to be better than the Mad King. Robert looks at Elia Martell's battered face again. She had been wed to Rhaegar, but she was also Prince Doran's sister. Dorne has remained neutral during the war, but they will not forget this insult to their blood. The Martells have long memories and patient hearts. Send for Tywin Lannister, Robert says finally. His voice carries across the throne room like thunder. Tell him his king would have words with him. Jon Arryn's face goes pale. Your Grace, perhaps we should consider. I have considered. Robert cuts him off. His blue eyes are hard as steel. I am king, and I will not be seen as a man who rewards the murder of children. Ned's expression softens slightly, but his voice remains firm. And if you choose pragmatism over justice? If you reward Tywin Lannister for his butchery? Robert meets his foster brother's gaze. The two young men stare at each other across the blood-stained litter. Everything hangs in the balance. The crown, the realm, their friendship. Robert can feel the weight of the Iron Throne behind him, but it is nothing compared to the weight of this decision. Then I am no better than Aerys Targaryen, Robert says quietly, and this crown means nothing. Jon Arryn opens his mouth to protest, but Robert holds up a hand. The king's voice booms across the throne room. Guards, send riders to Casterly Rock. Tell Lord Tywin Lannister that Robert Baratheon, first of his name, King of the Andals and the First Men, commands his immediate presence in King's Landing. The throne room erupts in whispered conversations as the courtiers who have gathered to watch the proceedings absorb the implications. Robert has chosen justice over gold, honor over expedience. The ramifications will echo through every great house in the Seven Kingdoms. Ned nods grimly and covers the bodies with the white cloth once more. You have made the right choice, Your Grace. History will remember this day. Robert is not so sure. He looks around the throne room at the faces of the lords and ladies who have come to pay homage to their new king. Some look approving, others worried. Many seem calculating, already wondering how this decision will affect their own positions. As the northern soldiers lift the litter to carry the bodies away for proper burial, Robert climbs back up to the Iron Throne. The metal cuts into him again, a reminder that ruling is never comfortable. He settles onto the seat of kings and prepares for the consequences of his choice. Jon Arryn approaches the throne one more time, his face grave. Your Grace, the Lannisters have many friends in the West. If you move against Lord Tywin, you risk civil war. Then so be it, Robert replies. His voice carries the finality of a king's decree. I will not build my reign on the bones of murdered children. Outside the throne room, ravens take flight from the Red Keep's towers, carrying word of the king's decision to every corner of the realm. In the distance, the bells of the Great Sept toll, as if marking the end of one age and the beginning of another. The Game of Thrones has begun, and Robert Baratheon has made his first move. Only time will tell if it is wisdom or folly that guides his hand. The great bells of King's Landing toll at dawn, their deep bronze voices carrying across the city like a funeral dirge. Word has spread through every street and alley that Lord Tywin Lannister will face judgment this day. The small folk gather in the plaza before the Great Sept, their faces filled with a mixture of excitement and dread. Never in living memory has a great lord been called to account for war crimes. Robert Baratheon stands at the tall windows of his solar, watching the crowds below. 3 days have passed since he summoned Tywin from Casterly Rock, and the old lion arrived in the night with a small escort of household guards. No army, no golden banners flying proud in the morning sun. Just a man coming to answer his king's call. Jon Arryn enters the chamber without announcement, his face grave as winter. Your Grace, the lords are assembling in the throne room. Lord Stark awaits your pleasure. Robert nods, but does not turn from the window. Below, he can see merchants hawking meat pies and ale to the growing crowd. They sense that history is being made this day, and they want to witness it. How many have answered the call? 43 lords, Your Grace. All the great houses save Dorne, and even Prince Doran has sent his brother to observe. Jon Arryn's voice carries the weight of years. This is unprecedented, Robert. No king has ever put a great lord on trial like a common criminal. Then perhaps it is time one did. Robert turns from the window and strides toward the door. His crown sits heavy on his brow, the weight of gold and rubies reminding him that kingship is never light. Today, he will either establish his authority over the realm, or watch it crumble before it has truly begun. The throne room buzzes with nervous energy as Robert enters. Lords in rich doublets and cloaks line the walls, their faces ranging from curious to concerned to openly hostile. Lord Hoster Tully stands with his brother Brynden, both men wearing the blue and silver of Riverrun. Beside them, Lord Stannis Baratheon watches with his characteristic frown, his jaw set like granite. Near the great doors, Tywin Lannister waits between 2 guards in royal livery. The Lord of Casterly Rock stands straight and proud, despite his chains, his green eyes cold as winter seas. He wears simple travelling clothes, rather than the rich silks and cloth of gold that usually mark his station. Yet even in chains, even stripped of his finery, Tywin Lannister commands attention. Behind him, almost hidden in the crowd, stand his children. Cersei clutches her white cloak around her shoulders, her golden hair falling loose around her face. At 13, she looks more child than woman, but her green eyes burn with fury at seeing her father in bondage. Beside her, Sir Jaime Lannister wears the white armor of the King's Guard, though his hand rests on his sword hilt. The boy is 16, but already tall and strong, his golden hair catching the morning light streaming through the windows. Robert climbs the steps to the Iron Throne, each footfall echoing in the vast chamber. When he settles onto the twisted metal seat, the room falls silent. The king's voice carries to every corner of the hall. Lords of the 7 kingdoms, we are gathered here to render judgment on serious charges brought against Tywin Lannister, Lord of Casterly Rock and Warden of the West. Robert's blue eyes find Tywin's green ones across the distance. You stand accused of ordering the brutal murder of Princess Rhaenys Targaryen, Prince Aegon Targaryen, and Lady Elia Martell of Dorne. How do you answer these charges? Tywin's voice rings out, clear and strong, unbroken by fear or remorse. I ordered the deaths of Rhaegar's children, Your Grace. I make no apologies for serving the realm's interests." A murmur runs through the assembled lords. Some nod approval, others shake their heads in disgust. Near the throne, Ned Stark's face hardens into stone. "The realm's interests?" Robert's voice rises. "You ordered the rape and murder of an innocent woman. You had children slaughtered in their beds." "I eliminated threats to your rule," Tywin replies coldly. "Those children would have grown up to challenge your crown. Elia Martell was unfortunate collateral damage, but necessary to ensure no one could claim the princes survived." "From the crowd of lords," a voice calls out, "bring forward the witnesses." Jon Arryn nods to the guards, and they escort 3 figures into the throne room. The first is a serving woman, her face pale and drawn. The second is a gold cloak who was in the Red Keep during the sack. The third is a young lord from the Crown Lands, whose lands were ravaged by Lannister forces. The serving woman steps forward first, her hands shaking as she faces the assembled might of the 7 kingdoms. "I saw them drag Princess Rhaenys from under Prince Rhaegar's bed," she says, her voice barely above a whisper. "She was crying for her mama. The big knight, Sir Gregor, he killed her with his bare hands." Cersei Lannister makes a small sound of distress, quickly stifled. Her brother Jaime's face goes pale beneath his golden hair. The gold cloak speaks next, his voice steady with military discipline. "I saw the babe's body afterward, Your Grace. His head was smashed against the wall. The blood and brains were still wet on the stone." The young lord's testimony is the most damning of all. "Lord Tywin's men burned my village and put every man, woman, and child to the sword. When I asked why, Sir Amory Lorch said it was to send a message, that this is what happens to those who serve Targaryens." When the witnesses finish, the throne room falls silent, except for the distant clamor of the crowds outside. Robert leans forward on the Iron Throne, his blue eyes boring into Tywin's green ones. "You have heard the testimony, Lord Tywin. Do you deny any of it?" "I deny nothing," Tywin says, his voice as sharp as Valyrian steel. "I did what was necessary to secure your reign, Robert Baratheon. I eliminated your enemies and delivered you a kingdom. If you lack the stomach for the hard choices that kingship requires, perhaps you should have remained a second son." The insult hits the throne room like a thunderbolt. Several lords gasp audibly. Lord Stannis's hand drops to his sword hilt, and Ned Stark takes a step forward, but it is Robert who responds, his voice like the rumble of distant thunder. "I have stomach enough for justice, Lord Tywin. The question is whether you have stomach enough to face the consequences of your actions." Ned Stark steps forward, his voice carrying across the hall with passionate intensity. "My lords, we have heard the testimony. We have seen the evidence. The question before us is simple. Will we allow the murder of innocents to go unpunished? Will we build the new kingdom on a foundation of butchered children and raped women?" His grey eyes sweep the assembled lords. Tywin Lannister claims he acted for the realm, but he acted only for himself. He waited until the war was won before choosing a side, then committed atrocities to prove his loyalty. This is not justice. This is not honor. This is the behavior of a man who puts gold above decency. From the crowd, Lord Randall Tarley speaks up. Lord Stark speaks pretty words, but wars are ugly things. Sometimes innocent blood must be spilled to secure the peace. "Then we are no better than the mad king we overthrew," Ned replies sharply. "Aerys burned innocent men alive and called it justice. How are we different if we excuse the murder of babes?" The debate that follows is fierce and heated. Lord after lord rises to speak, some defending Tywin's actions as necessary pragmatism, others condemning them as inexcusable barbarity. The throne room echoes with passionate arguments about duty, honor, necessity, and justice. Through it all, Tywin Lannister stands silent and proud, his face showing no emotion. But his children are not so composed. Cersei weeps openly now, tears streaming down her face as she watches her father's reputation torn apart. Jaime's hand never leaves his sword hilt, his young face a mask of anguish as he struggles between his oath to protect the king and his love for his family. Finally, Robert calls for silence. The king's voice booms across the chamber. "Enough. We have heard all arguments. Lords of the Seven Kingdoms, you will now render your judgment. All those who find Tywin Lannister guilty of war crimes and sentence him to death, step to the right. All those who would show mercy, step to the left." The lords begin to move, their footsteps echoing in the vast hall. Ned Stark is among the first to step right, followed by his brother by marriage, Hoster Tully. Lord Stannis joins them without hesitation, his stern face showing no doubt. But others move left. Lord Randall Tarley, Lord Rose Bolton, several lords from the Reach and Stormlands. The division runs deep, splitting the realm's nobility down lines of pragmatism and principle. When the movement stops, Robert counts carefully. The vote is closer than he expected, but justice prevails by a margin of 7 voices. 25 lords have voted for death, 18 for mercy. Tywin Lannister receives the verdict with no change in expression. When Robert asks if he has any final words, the old lion's voice cuts through the chamber like a blade. "You think this makes you strong, boy king? You think justice will keep your enemies at bay?" Tywin's green eyes blaze with cold fury. "You have made a powerful enemy this day. My name may die with me, but House Lannister will remember. And when your reign crumbles, when your kingdom burns, remember that you chose this path." The curse hangs in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. Robert rises from the Iron Throne, his face set in stone. "Tywin Lannister, by the authority of the Iron Throne and the judgment of your peers, I sentence you to die. The sentence will be carried out at sunset in the plaza, before the Great Sept, so that all may witness that justice applies to high and low alike." As the guards lead Tywin away, Cersei breaks from the crowd and runs after her father. "Papa!" she cries, her voice breaking. "Papa, please!" Jaime starts forward as if to follow, but stops himself. His oath to the crown wars with his love for his family, leaving him frozen between loyalty and blood. The lords begin to file out of the throne room, their faces grave. Some look satisfied that justice has been done, others worried about the precedent that has been set. The Game of Thrones has taken a turn no one expected. As the sun begins its descent toward the western horizon, the bells of King's Landing toll once more. In the plaza before the Great Sept, a headsman's block waits. Soon, the most powerful lord in the 7 kingdoms will lay his neck upon it, and the realm will learn whether kings are truly above lords, or whether the game has rules no one can break. The crowd grows restless as they wait for sunset. History is about to be written in blood and steel, and every man and woman in King's Landing knows they are witnesses to the changing of an age. The headsman's axe falls as the sun touches the horizon, and Lord Tywin Lannister dies with the same cold dignity he showed in life. The crowd roars its approval as the old lion's head rolls across the stone. But in the Red Keep, his children face a future darker than any dungeon. Cersei Lannister sits in her chambers, still wearing the black dress she donned for her father's execution. At 13, she understands that her world has shattered, but not yet how completely. The door opens without ceremony, and Sir Kevan Lannister enters with heavy steps. Tywin's younger brother looks older than his years, his face drawn with grief and exhaustion. "Uncle Kevan," Cersei rises from her chair, her green eyes bright with unshed tears. "What news from the king? Pack your belongings, child. Only what you can carry." Kevan's voice is hoarse from shouting orders all day. "Robert Baratheon has decreed that all Lannisters must quit King's Landing within the fortnight. Casterly Rock is forfeit to the crown." The words hit Cersei like a physical blow. She staggers backward, her hand clutching the window frame for support. He cannot. Casterly Rock has been ours for thousands of years. He can, and he has. Kevin moves to the window and stares out at the city below. Smoke still rises from the plaza where the execution took place. Royal decree went out an hour ago. All Lannister lands, gold and holdings are seized by the Crown for crimes against the realm. In the Tower of the Hand, Jon Arryn reviews the proclamation one more time before affixing the royal seal. The parchment bears Robert's signature in bold strokes, each letter final, as a grave marker. Beside him stands Ned Stark, his face grim but satisfied. This will cause unrest in the Westerlands, Jon Arryn warns. The lesser lords who served House Lannister may not accept new masters easily. Then they will learn to accept them, or face the same fate as their former liege lord, Ned replies coldly. Justice must be seen to be done, Lord Arryn. Half measures will only breed more rebellion. Meanwhile, in the White Sword Tower, Sir Jaime Lannister sits on his narrow bed and stares at the white cloak in his hands. The silk is stained with tears he refuses to acknowledge. At 16, he has sworn sacred oaths to protect the king and serve the realm, but the king has just executed his father and destroyed his family. Sir Barristan Selmy enters the chamber, his weathered face showing compassion beneath his stern exterior. Sir Jaime, you are summoned to the throne room. Jaime looks up with red-rimmed eyes. To face judgment for my father's crimes? To renew your vows to the crown, I believe. The old knight's voice is gentle. The king wishes to know where your loyalties lie. In Casterly Rock's great hall, 300 leagues to the west, chaos reigns. Servants run through corridors carrying chests and bundles, while men-at-arms strip the walls of Lannister banners. The golden lions that have watched over this hall for centuries are torn down and burned in the courtyard, their ashes scattered on the wind. Sir Kevin stands in the hall where his grandfather once held court, watching the systematic destruction of his family's legacy. A raven arrived at dawn bearing the king's decree, and by midday royal officials had arrived to oversee the transfer of power. They work with brutal efficiency, cataloguing every golden dragon, every piece of jewelry, every bolt of silk. How much gold remains in the vaults? Asks Sir Adam Marbrand, who has been appointed by the crown to oversee the transition. Near 40,000 dragons, sir, replies the castle's steward, his voice shaking. Plus the family treasures and the mining yields from this month? Sir Adam nods grimly. It all goes to King's Landing. Robert's wars have left the crown in debt, and this gold will help stabilize the realm. In the nursery, 8-year-old Tyrion Lannister sits quietly in a corner, watching the adults rush about in panic. The boy is small for his age and clever beyond his years, with mismatched eyes that seem to see everything. While his siblings rage and weep, Tyrion observes with the detachment of someone already learning that the world cares nothing for fairness. "What will happen to us, Uncle Kevin?" he asks when his uncle passes by. Kevin stops and kneels beside the child, his face softening slightly. "I don't know, lad. The king's mercy is not known to extend to Lannisters." "Father would have planned for this," Tyrion says, matter-of-factly. "He always said that the strong survive and the weak perish. We were not strong enough." The simplicity of the observation from such a young mouth strikes Kevin like a blow. The child understands what many adults refuse to accept, that their family's power was built on fear and gold, and without either they are nothing. Back in King's Landing, Cersei paces her chambers like a caged lioness. She has dismissed her servants and stands alone with her desperate thoughts. The sound of boots in the corridor makes her heart race. When the door opens to reveal King Robert, she forces herself to smile. "Your Grace," she says, curtsying low. The black dress clings to her young figure, and she has arranged her golden hair to catch the candlelight. At 13, she is still more child than woman, but desperation makes her bold. Robert enters the chamber but keeps his distance. His blue eyes are hard as winter steel. Lady Cersei, I trust you are preparing for your departure. Your Grace, surely there is some arrangement we might reach. She steps closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. I could be useful to you. My father spoke truly when he said I could give you sons. The king's face darkens with disgust. You are a child, Cersei Lannister, and you are your father's daughter. I want neither your body nor your children. The rejection hits her like a slap. Cersei's mask of seduction crumbles, revealing the frightened girl beneath. Then what are we to do? Where are we to go? That is not my concern, Robert replies coldly. You have gold enough to buy passage across the narrow sea. I suggest you use it before my patience runs out entirely. When Robert leaves, Cersei collapses onto her bed and weeps with the abandon of a child who has lost everything. Outside her window, she can hear the sound of hammers and saws as workers dismantle the Lannister apartments in the Red Keep. In the throne room, Jaime kneels before the Iron Throne while the court watches in silence. His white armor gleams in the afternoon light, but his face is pale as death. Robert leans forward on the twisted metal seat, studying the young knight who served as his predecessor's bodyguard. Sir Jaime Lannister, Robert's voice echoes in the vast chamber. You swore sacred oaths to protect the crown and serve the realm. Your father died a traitor's death. Where do your loyalties lie? Jaime raises his head, and his green eyes meet the king's blue ones. The weight of his choice hangs in the air between them. Around the throne room, lords and ladies hold their breath. I swore an oath to serve the realm, your grace. The realm, not any single family. The words taste like ashes in his mouth, but Jaime speaks them clearly. I renew my vows to the Iron Throne, and to you as my king. Robert nods slowly. Then you may keep your white cloak, Sir Jaime. But know this, I will be watching. One hint of treachery, one whisper of divided loyalty, and you will join your father. 2 days later, Cersei and a handful of loyal retainers board a ship bound for Tyrosh. She has sold her jewelry to pay for passage and bribes, keeping only a single ruby necklace that belonged to her mother. Jaime comes to the docks to see her off, still wearing his white armor. Come with me, she pleads, clutching his hand. We can start again across the sea. We can be together. Jaime's face is torn with anguish. I cannot break my oath, Cersei. The white cloak is all I have left. Your oath is to a king who murdered our father. My oath is to the realm, Jaime replies quietly. Father taught us that family comes first, but perhaps he was wrong. Perhaps some things matter more than blood. Cersei stares at her twin brother, as if seeing him for the first time. The golden boy she has loved since birth is choosing duty over family, crown over blood. When the ship's captain calls for departure, she boards without another word. As the vessel disappears over the horizon, Jaime stands on the docks until the sun sets. He has lost everything: father, sister, name, legacy. All that remains is the white cloak and the oaths that now feel more like chains than honor. At Casterly Rock, the last of the Lannister banners burns in the courtyard as Sir Adam Marbrand raises the royal stag above the gate. The sight brings tears to the eyes of servants who have served the Golden Lions all their lives, but none dare protest. The age of Lannister power in the West has ended. Young Tyrion watches from a window as the new banners snap in the evening breeze. Unlike his weeping siblings, the 8-year-old shows no emotion. He has already learned the first lesson of survival, that sentiment is a luxury the powerless cannot afford. Uncle, he says to Kevin, who stands beside him, will we ever come home? Kevin's weathered hand rests on the boy's shoulder. I don't know, lad, but Lannisters have survived worse than this. We will endure. But as the last light fades from the sky and Casterly Rock settles under new management, it seems to those watching that the golden age of House Lannister has ended forever. The lions have been cast out of their den, and the realm must learn to survive without their gold and their ruthless pragmatism. In King's Landing, Robert Baratheon sits on the Iron Throne and contemplates his victory. He has achieved justice, but at what cost? The crown now holds Casterly Rock's wealth, but it also holds responsibility for governing the restless Westerlands. The Game of Thrones has rules, but Robert is learning that winning often means accepting consequences no victor truly wants to face. Outside the Red Keep, the city sleeps uneasily. Change hangs in the air like smoke, and everyone can sense that the realm they knew yesterday is gone forever. What rises from its ashes remains to be seen. The raven arrives at dawn, its black wings cutting through the morning mist that clings to the Red Keep's towers. Jon Arryn breaks the seal with trembling fingers, his weathered face growing paler as he reads. The message bears the seal of House Crakehall, and its contents make his stomach turn. Robert Baratheon finds his hand in the tower of the Hand Solar, hunched over a desk covered with similar ravens. Maps of the Seven Kingdoms spread across every surface, marked with red ink that looks disturbingly like blood in the candlelight. More troubles from the west? Robert asks, settling his bulk into a chair that creaks under his weight. 6 months have passed since Tywin Lannister's execution, and the king looks older than his 20 years. Dark circles ring his blue eyes, and his famous smile has grown rare as dragons. Sir Roland Crakehall writes that his small folk have driven out the royal tax collectors, Jon Arryn replies, setting down the parchment with a sigh. They claim the new lords are foreigners who have no right to rule over them. 3 villages have burned their harvest rather than hand over grain to the crown. Robert's fist crashes down on the desk, scattering ink and parchment. 7 hells! How many does that make this month? 17 lords in open defiance, Your Grace. Perhaps twice that number in quiet resistance. Jon Arryn gestures to the map, where red marks cluster thick across the Westerlands. The gold mines at Casterly Rock produce only half what they did under Lannister rule. The workers claim the new overseers are cruel and incompetent. In the throne room, Tyrion Lannister sits on a small stool beside the Iron Throne, his mismatched eyes watching the mourning petitioners with keen interest. At 8 years old, he's a strange sight among the great lords and their retinues, but Robert has grown fond of the boy's sharp observations. Where his siblings chose exile or bitter silence, Tyrion adapted with the pragmatism that will one day make him famous. "Tell me what you see, lad," Robert murmurs, as a delegation from the Reach approaches the throne. Tyrion tilts his head, studying the approaching lords with the intensity of a maester examining a text. Lord Redwyne walks 3 paces behind Lord Hightower, Your Grace, when normally he would walk beside him. And see how Lord Hightower's guards wear mail beneath their silk? They expect trouble. Robert's eyes narrow as he focuses on the delegation. The boy is right. Something has changed in the careful dance of court politics, and the great houses are positioning themselves like pieces on a Sivas board. Lord Leighton Hightower approaches the Iron Throne with measured steps, his face a mask of courtly politeness. Behind him, Lord Paxter Redwyne's expression shows barely concealed worry. "Your Grace," Lord Hightower says, bowing just low enough to show respect without submission. "We come to discuss the situation in the Westerlands." "Speak plainly, my lord," Robert replies. "I have little patience for flowery words this morning." "The disruption of trade routes has cost our houses dearly, Your Grace. Lannister gold once flowed freely through Old Town's markets. Without it, merchants struggle to pay their debts, and our own incomes suffer." Hightower's voice remains level, but his eyes hold a calculating gleam. Perhaps some accommodation with the exiled members of House Lannister might be reached. Robert's face darkens like a summer storm. "You suggest I pardon murderers and oath-breakers for the sake of gold?" "I suggest the realm needs stability more than it needs vengeance," Hightower replies carefully. "The Westerlands burn while we argue over justice." From his stool, Tyrion watches the exchange with growing understanding. He sees how his father's death has created a wound in the realm's flesh, and how that wound festers without the harsh medicine of Lannister efficiency. Meanwhile, in the city below, Petyr Baelish moves through the streets of King's Landing like a shadow given form. The young lord from the Vale has risen quickly in royal service, his clever mind and gift for numbers making him invaluable to a crown drowning in debt. But Littlefinger sees opportunity, where others see crisis. He enters a tavern near the docks, where a hooded figure waits in a dark corner. The man's clothing is rich but travel-stained, and his fingers bear the calluses of a swordsman. "Sir Kevin sends his regards," the figure says without preamble. "The gold is ready for transport." Littlefinger slides into the booth across from him, his thin smile never wavering. "And the arrangements with the free cities?" Tyrosh and Lys have agreed to the terms. Maya remains hesitant, but gold speaks louder than politics in the end. The man's voice carries a slight accent that might be from Lannisport. "When do you want the shipments to begin?" "Soon," Littlefinger replies. "The crown's debts grow daily, and Robert's righteousness does not pay for grain or steel. When he realizes how much his justice costs, he may be more flexible in his dealings with certain exiled parties." Across the narrow sea, Cersei Lannister paces the marble floors of a Tyroshi merchant prince's palace. At 13, she has learned to use her golden hair and green eyes as weapons, though her targets are now Essosi gold instead of Westerosi lords. The merchant prince, Magister Ordello, watches her with the hungry eyes of a man accustomed to buying whatever catches his fancy. "My sweet lioness," he purrs in accented common tongue. "You seem troubled this evening." "I dream of home," Cersei replies, allowing her voice to break slightly. She has perfected this performance over the months of exile, of the castle where my ancestors ruled for centuries. "Dreams can become reality with enough gold," Ordello says, moving closer. "And you know how generous I can be to those who please me." The words make Cersei's skin crawl, but she forces herself to smile. Each night spent in the merchant prince's bed is another handful of gold toward her eventual return. Each humiliation endured is a step closer to revenge against the king who destroyed her family. In King's Landing, Jon Arryn sits in his solar with ledgers spread before him like accusations. The numbers tell a story more frightening than any raven's message. Without Lannister gold flowing into the royal treasury, the crown teeters on the edge of bankruptcy. A knock on the door interrupts his grim calculations. Stannis Baratheon enters without ceremony, his jaw set in its habitual frown. At 17, the king's younger brother has the stern bearing of a man twice his age. "The situation grows worse," Stannis states without preamble. 3 more lordships in the Westerlands have declared for whoever pays them. Sellswords roam the roads, and honest merchants fear to travel. "I am aware of the problems, Lord Stannis," Jon Arryn replies wearily. "Are you aware of the solution?" Stannis's voice cuts like steel. "Robert needs a wife. He needs heirs. He needs the alliance that comes with a strong marriage." Jon Arryn sets down his quill and studies the young lord. "Your brother refuses all suggestions of marriage. He claims no woman would have him after what he did to the Lannisters." "Then he is a fool, as well as stubborn," Stannis snaps. "Lyanna Stark is dead. Cersei Lannister is exiled. There are other great houses with daughters who could strengthen the crown. And all of them know that Robert chose principle over profit," Jon Arryn observes. "They wonder if a king who executes his allies might someday execute his in-laws." That evening, in the Red Keep's library, Tyrion sits cross-legged on the floor with books piled around him like fortress walls. Most children his age play with wooden swords and toy knights, but Tyrion has found his weapons in words and numbers. Maester Pycelle watches with disapproval as the boy reads texts meant for grown scholars. "It's unnatural," the Maester mutters to Ned Stark, who has come to check on the child's education. A boy his age should not understand such things. Ned looks at Tyrion, who appears absorbed in a treatise on Valyrian trade routes, but is actually listening to every word. Perhaps understanding is what we need more of, Maester. Tywin Lannister thought himself the cleverest man in Westeros, and look where it brought him. Tyrion closes the book and looks up at the adults with his mismatched eyes. Lord Stark, may I ask a question? Of course, lad. If my father had bent the knee and asked for mercy, would the king have spared him? The question hangs in the air like incense in a sept. Ned considers his words carefully. Perhaps. Your father's pride was always his weakness. He could never admit when he was wrong. Then perhaps I should learn from his mistakes, Tyrion says, with the solemnity of a much older person. Pride seems a luxury our family can no longer afford. As night falls over King's Landing, Robert stands on the battlements of the Red Keep and stares out at his kingdom. Reports flood in daily of unrest and rebellion, of traders fleeing the Westerlands and gold drying up like a river in drought. The moral victory he won feels increasingly hollow as the practical costs mount. A crossbow bolt hisses past his ear and embeds itself in the stone behind him. Robert throws himself to the ground as more bolts follow, his guards rushing to surround him with shields and steel. "The roof!" one guard shouts. "There, on the Tower of the Hand!" But by the time they search, the assassin is gone, leaving only a note pinned to the door with a dagger. The message is brief and unsigned. Justice has a price, usurper. You will pay it in full. Later that night, in the small council chamber, the king's advisors gather around a table lit by guttering candles. The assassination attempt has shaken everyone, even the unflappable Jon Arryn. "The Westerlands grow bolder," Ned observes, turning the assassin's note over in his hands. "And we grow weaker. Half the realm's gold came from Lannister mines." "Gold we can replace," Robert says firmly. "Honor once lost cannot be bought back." But even as he speaks the words, Robert wonders if he believes them anymore. The crown totters on foundations of debt and rebellion, while somewhere across the narrow sea, his enemies gather strength and plan their return. In the shadows beyond the candlelight, young Tyrion Lannister watches and listens. He has learned that survival requires understanding the game being played around him. His father ruled through fear and gold, but both weapons are gone now. The boy will have to find new tools for the battles ahead, and he suspects those tools will be wit and patience rather than swords and lies. The Game of Thrones continues, but the rules have changed. Robert Baratheon chose justice over pragmatism, and the realm bleeds for his nobility. Whether that bleeding will heal or prove fatal remains to be seen. But one thing is certain. The easy answers died with Tywin Lannister on the executioner's block, and the hard questions are only just beginning. Spring comes early to the north in the year 284, and with it comes hope for new beginnings. The great hall of Winterfell rings with laughter for the first time in months as Robert Baratheon raises his cup to toast his bride. Lady Jorah Mormont, eldest sister to the fierce Lyanna Mormont of Bear Island, sits beside the king with quiet dignity. At 22, she possesses the dark hair and grey eyes common to the north, along with the steady strength that marks House Mormont. "To my queen," Robert declares, his voice carrying across the packed hall, "may our union bring peace to the realm and strength to the north." The assembled lords roar their approval. Stark banners hang beside royal stags, and for the first time since Tywin Lannister's execution, the realm feels stable. Ned Stark raises his own cup, his face showing the satisfaction of a man who sees his plans bearing fruit. "To the union of ice and fire," Ned calls out, using an old northern saying, "may your children be as strong as winter wolves and as brave as storm stags." Robert grins at his foster brother. The months of political turmoil have aged the young king, but tonight he looks like the laughing warrior who won the throne. Beside him, Queen Jorah smiles with genuine warmth. She understands the politics of this marriage, but she has also come to respect the man who chose justice over gold. In the months that follow, the royal court settles into a new rhythm. The Queen proves herself a capable partner to her husband, bringing northern practicality to the southern court. When lord after lord comes seeking royal favour, she sits beside Robert and offers counsel born of Bear Island's harsh realities. Meanwhile, at Winterfell, Ned Stark's household grows in ways that would have been impossible under different circumstances. Jon Snow stands beside Robb Stark as they watch their father train the castle's men-at-arms. Both boys are barely walking, but already the differences between this world and what might have been are apparent. "Tell me again why Uncle Robert chose Mother over the Lannister girl," Robb asks, as they play with wooden swords in Winterfell's Godswood. Jon, now acknowledged as Ned's son, though born of different circumstances, considers the question with the seriousness of a 5-year-old. Because the Lannister girl's father was bad. Father says Uncle Robert chose honor over gold. The truth is more complex, but for children raised in a world where their parents' choices shaped history, the simple version suffices. They grow up knowing that kings can choose justice, that moral choices have consequences, and that sometimes doing right costs more than doing wrong. Theon Greyjoy, now 10 years old and thoroughly integrated into the Stark household, watches the boys with the mixture of envy and affection that marks all foster children. In this timeline, he is not just a hostage, but truly part of the family. Without the Lannister threat hanging over everything, the Starks have had space to be generous with their affections. "Your father writes that trade with the Iron Islands has improved," Catelyn tells Theon, as they break their fast in the Great Hall. "Perhaps next year you might visit Pike." Theon's face lights up at the possibility. In the original timeline, such visits were impossible. Balon Greyjoy's rebellion made him too dangerous to trust. But Robert's decisive handling of the Lannister situation has established his authority in a way that discourages further rebellions. South in King's Landing, the royal nursery welcomes its first prince in the autumn of 285. Prince Eddard Baratheon, named for his father's dearest friend, enters the world with his mother's grey eyes and his father's black hair. The symbolism is lost on no one. Here is an heir with both northern ice and southern storm in his blood. Robert cradles his son with the wonder of a man who had expected to die young and childless. "Look at him, Ned," he says, when his foster brother visits King's Landing for the naming ceremony. "Strong as a bull, and he's not even walking yet." "He has his mother's good sense, at least," Ned replies with a rare smile. "The realm will need that more than strength in the years to come." But even as the royal family celebrates, ravens carry troubling news from across the narrow sea. In Tyrosh, the exiled Lannisters have not been idle. Cersei, now 16 and grown into stunning beauty, has become the unofficial queen of the Tyroshi exile community. Her marriage to Magister Ordello has filled her coffers with gold, and she uses every coin to further her cause. In the Red Keep's small council chamber, Jon Arryn spreads intelligence reports across the table, like a general planning a campaign. The aging hand's face shows the strain of years spent managing Robert's noble but impractical approach to kingship. "The Golden Company has declared for the Pretender," he reports, using the council's official term for Cersei Lannister. 10,000 sellswords, the best trained in Essos. Their Captain General claims descent from Egon, the unworthy's bastards. Robert's fist crashes down on the table, scattering papers. "Let them come. We faced down Rhaegar Targaryen and won. Some exile with sellsword gold doesn't frighten me." "This is different," a young voice interjects from the corner. Tyrion Lannister, now 11 years old, and serving as an unofficial advisor despite his age, steps forward with a scroll in his hands. "My sister isn't playing the game the way father would have played it." The small council has grown accustomed to the dwarf child's insights. Where his father used brutal efficiency and his siblings used emotion, Tyrion employs pure logic. His warnings have proven accurate too often, to ignore. "Explain, lad," Robert commands. "Cersei was always the cleverest of us, your grace, though father never saw it because she was female." Tyrion's mismatched eyes are grave beyond his years. "She's not trying to win through force alone. She's building a coalition of everyone who lost wealth when the Lannisters fell. Essosi merchants, exiled Westerosi lords, sellsword companies hungry for legitimacy." Jon Arryn leans forward, interested despite himself. "What do you think she's planning?" "To make herself seem like the solution to the realm's problems rather than their cause," Tyrion replies. "The Westerlands still burn. Trade has never recovered from father's death. She'll present herself as the rightful heir who can restore prosperity." The implications hang heavy in the chamber. Robert's moral victory has created practical problems that his enemies can exploit. Cersei Lannister, once a 13-year-old exile, has transformed herself into a genuine threat. Meanwhile, in the training yards of Winterfell, a different kind of preparation takes place. Robb Stark and Jon Snow, now 6 years old, practice with blunted swords under Ser Rodrik Castle's watchful eye. Without the shadow of bastardy hanging over him, Jon has flourished. He still carries the quiet intensity that will mark him in later years, but he lacks the desperate need to prove himself that shaped him in the original timeline. "Well struck, Jon," Ser Rodrik calls as the boy lands a clean hit on his practice partner. But remember, victory goes to the fighter who thinks as well as swings. The lesson applies to more than swordplay. In this world, the Stark children grow up understanding that choices have consequences, that justice requires sacrifice, and that strength comes from unity rather than individual glory. Catelyn watches from the castle's walls, her hand resting on her swelling belly. Another child grows within her, and she thinks of the world this babe will inherit. It is a world where honor matters, where kings choose right over expedience, but also a world where such choices create dangerous enemies. The children seem happy, Maester Luwin observes as he joins her at the battlements. "They are," Catelyn agrees, "but I wonder what price their happiness will demand of them someday." In King's Landing, Queen Jorah faces similar thoughts as she holds Prince Eddard in the royal gardens. At 2 years old, he toddles among the roses with the fearless curiosity of a child who has never known danger. But his mother knows that crowns make targets of those who wear them, and enemies gather strength across the narrow waters. A raven arrives from Tyrosh as she watches her son play. The message is brief but chilling. The Golden Company sails at first light. Tell Robert Baratheon that House Lannister remembers its debts. The seal shows a golden lion rampant, pressed into red wax like a drop of blood. That evening, the small council convenes in emergency session. Robert sits at the head of the table, his face grim as death. Around him, his advisors argue strategies and contingencies, but the king's attention focuses on young Tyrion Lannister. "You knew this would come," Robert says quietly. "Didn't you, lad?" Tyrion nods with the gravity of someone far older than his 11 years. "I hoped I was wrong, your grace. But Cersei never forgives, and she never forgets. When we were children, she once spent 3 years planning revenge on a stable boy who mocked her dress. And now she has an army," Ned Stark observes from his seat at Robert's right hand. "Now she has an army," Tyrion agrees. "But armies cost gold, and gold runs out eventually. The question is whether she can achieve her goals before her resources are exhausted." Outside the Red Keep, King's Landing sleeps uneasily. Rumors spread through taverns and marketplaces like wildfire. The Lannisters are coming home. Some whisper. The old order returns with sword and fire. Others scoff at such fears, trusting in their king's strength and their kingdom's justice. But in the royal nursery, Prince Eddard sleeps peacefully, unaware that his birth has changed the game entirely. He is Robert's heir, born of a union that symbolizes the strength of doing right. but he is also a target for those who see his very existence as an obstacle to their ambitions. The first moves have been made in a game that will define a generation. Robert Baratheon chose honor over gold, justice over expedience, and the North over the West. Now his enemies come to test whether such choices can withstand the harsh realities of power. In Winterfell's Godswood, beneath the ancient heart tree, Ned Stark kneels in prayer. He asks the old gods to protect the children who will inherit this world of consequences, to give them strength for the trials ahead, and to let the choices made in justice's name prove worthy of the price they demanded. The Game of Thrones continues, but the players have changed, and the stakes have never been higher. The Tyroshi sun beats down mercilessly on the training yards where the Golden Company drills, their golden cloaks gleaming like flames in the afternoon heat. Jaime Lannister watches from the shade of a silk pavilion, his green eyes calculating as he studies each movement of the sellswords beneath his command. At 19, 4 years of exile have transformed him from a callow youth into something harder and more dangerous. "They're ready," he tells his sister as she joins him in the pavilion. Cersei, now 17 and grown into devastating beauty, carries herself with the poise of a queen despite her exile. Her golden hair is braided in the Tyroshi fashion, and silk scarves flutter around her like captured sunlight. "How many?" she asks, settling onto cushions that cost more than most Westerosi lords make in a year. 12,000 swords, sworn to our cause. Another 5,000 camp followers and support. Jaime's voice carries the authority of a man who has earned respect through steel rather than birth. "The Windblown have agreed to join us when we sail, and the Second Sons are considering terms." Cersei smiles with satisfaction. The girl who fled King's Landing in tears has become a woman who commands armies and topples kingdoms. Her marriage to Magister Ordello lasted only long enough to secure his fortune, and his mysterious death from poison left her the wealthiest widow in Tyrosh. "What word from our friends in Westeros?" she inquires, her fingers trailing over maps spread across a low table. The charts show the coasts of the Seven Kingdoms in meticulous detail, marked with potential landing sites and loyal strongholds. A hooded figure steps from the shadows behind the pavilion. Lord Titus Crakehall, once a proud bannerman to House Lannister, now serves as Cersei's spy master in exile. His face bears the scars of a man who fought his way out of the Westerlands when Robert's justice came for Lannister supporters. "Littlefinger sends his regards," Titus says, producing a sealed letter from his robes. "The crown's debts continue to mount. Without Lannister gold, the royal treasury bleeds money faster than Robert can pour wine down his throat." Cersei breaks the seal with practiced ease. Pater Baelish's careful script covers 2 pages, each line calculated to serve his own mysterious purposes. But the information he provides is valuable enough to overlook his motives. "Excellent," she murmurs as she reads. Lord Arryn grows desperate. He's borrowing from the Iron Bank of Braavos now, and we both know how patient Braavosi bankers are when payments come late. In the training yard below, sellswords clash with steel and fury. These are not the disciplined knights of Westeros, but hard men who fight for gold and glory in equal measure. Yet under Jaime's leadership, they have developed a cohesion that rivals any royal army. Sir Harry Strickland, Captain General of the Golden Company, approaches the pavilion with respectful distance. The grizzled sellsword has served many causes in his long career, but none have impressed him quite like the exiled lioness who pays his men's wages in Tyroshi gold. "My lady," he says with a bow that manages to be both respectful and slightly mocking, "the ships are being fitted for war. 40 war galleys and twice as many transports. We'll be ready to sail within the moon." "And our other preparations?" Cersei asks. "The Westerland's exiles grow restless for home," Strickland replies. "Lord Lyddon's son arrived yesterday with 200 men. Says the new lords Robert installed are bleeding his father's former lands dry with taxes." This is music to Cersei's ears. Every Westerosi lord who flees Robert's justice becomes another sword in her service, another grievance against the usurper king. The exile community in Tyrosh has swelled to nearly 3,000 souls, all nursing hatred for the man who destroyed their old lives. As evening falls, Cersei retires to her private chambers in the palace she has claimed as her own. The rooms are decorated in the Tyroshi fashion, with silk hangings and carved wooden screens, but golden lions still prowl the tapestries. Some things cannot be forgotten, even in exile. Jaime follows her, as he has every night since they left King's Landing. Brother and sister, knight and queen, their relationship has deepened into something that would horrify the Septons of Westeros, but seems natural in the lawless world of Essos. "I have news," Cersei says, as she settles onto her bed of silk and silver. Her hand rests on her swelling belly, and her green eyes shine with triumph. The child quickens. Jaime's face transforms with wonder and terror in equal measure. "Are you certain?" The Tyroshi healers confirm it. A son, they believe, strong and healthy. Cersei's voice carries the satisfaction of a woman who has secured her dynasty's future. "He will be born a prince in exile, but he will return as a king." The implications hang heavy in the perfumed air. Their child will be born of incest, but also of love and ambition. In Westeros, such a babe would be an abomination, but in Essos, different rules apply. The Targaryens wed brother to sister for centuries, and called it purity of blood. "Robert's heir is still a child," Jaime observes as he moves to the window overlooking Tyrosh's harbour. Below, their invasion fleet takes shape. Prince Eddard is barely 2 years old. "Children have accidents," Cersei replies with cold practicality. "Especially when armies march and cities burn. The boy's death would be unfortunate, but hardly unprecedented in times of war." Meanwhile, across the narrow sea in King's Landing, ravens bring disturbing reports to the small council chamber. Tywin Lannister, now 12 years old and sharp as Valyrian steel, studies the intelligence with growing concern. "The Golden Company's strength has doubled in the past year," he reports to the assembled councillors. "My sister is not just gathering sellswords. She's building a kingdom in exile." Robert Baratheon leans forward in his chair, his face showing the strain of years spent watching for threats from across the sea. "How long before they're ready to sail?" "Soon, Your Grace," Jon Arryn answers grimly. "Our spies report preparations for a major expedition. Ships, supplies, and men gathering in Tyroshi harbours." "Let them come," Robert growls. "I faced down the Mad King's son. Some exile with sellsword gold doesn't frighten me." But Tyrion's young face shows worry beyond his years. "This isn't about gold anymore, Your Grace. It's about legitimacy. Cersei Style herself, the rightful heir to Casterly Rock, denied her birthright by an usurper's justice. Every lord who lost lands or title when you executed my father becomes a potential ally." The truth of this assessment settles over the small council like a funeral shroud. Robert's noble choice has consequences that continue to unfold, and his enemies have had years to prepare their response. In Tyrosh, as the moon rises over the harbour, Cersei stands on her palace balcony and surveys her growing fleet. 40 war galleys bob at anchor, their hulls black as storm clouds. The Golden Company's banners flutter from their masts, and she imagines them flying above King's Landing once more. A knock on the chamber door interrupts her contemplation. A Tyroshi servant enters with another sealed message, this one bearing the Kraken of House Greyjoy. Cersei breaks the seal eagerly. Balon Greyjoy's careful words dance around treason, but the meaning is clear. The Iron Islands chafe under Robert's rule, and whispers of rebellion grow stronger with each passing season. An alliance with the exiled Lannisters might serve both their interests. "The Ironborn hunger for battle," she tells Jaime as he reads over her shoulder. Balon Greyjoy offers his fleet to our cause in exchange for recognition of Iron Island independence. Can we trust him? Jaime asks. We can trust his hatred of Robert Baratheon, Cersei replies with a cold smile. The Greyjoys remember the last time they tried rebellion. This time, they want allies who can provide gold and legitimacy. As dawn approaches, Cersei's labor pains begin in earnest. Tiroshi midwives bustle around her chambers, while Jaime paces like a caged wolf in the antechamber. The birth of their child will change everything, marking the true beginning of their campaign to reclaim what was lost. Prince Joffrey Lannister enters the world screaming defiance at the foreign sky above Tyrosh. He has his mother's golden hair and his father's green eyes, and from his first breath he seems destined for greatness or destruction. The midwives clean him and wrap him in cloth of gold, while his parents marvel at the perfection of his small form. He will be a king, Cersei whispers as she holds her son for the first time. Not of some lordship granted by an usurper, but of the 7 kingdoms, by right of blood and conquest. Outside the palace, the Golden Company raises their cups in toast to their prince born in exile. Word spreads through the Tyroshi exile community that the true heir to House Lannister has been born, and with him comes renewed hope for return and revenge. In King's Landing, Tyrion Lannister wakes from dreams of golden lions and burning cities. His young mind cannot yet grasp the full implications of what his sister is building across the sea, but he senses that the Game of Thrones is about to enter a new and deadlier phase. The pieces are moving toward war. Robert Baratheon chose justice over expedience and made enemies who will not forgive or forget. Cersei Lannister chose exile over submission and built an army that dreams of home. Between them lies the narrow sea, but that barrier grows thinner with each passing day. Soon, the Golden Lions will return to Westeros, and the realm will learn whether moral victories can withstand the tide of vengeance that has spent years gathering strength in the free cities of Essos. The great bells of King's Landing toll the alarm as the first raven arrives from Dragonstone, its black wings cutting through the morning mist like an omen of war. Stannis Baratheon's message is brief and chilling. Golden Company fleet sighted, 40 war galleys, course set for Blackwater Bay, prepare for battle. Robert Baratheon stands at the great window of his solar, his hands clenched behind his back as he watches the city below stir to frantic activity. 15 years have passed since he executed Tywin Lannister, and the king's black hair now shows threads of silver. At 35, he carries the weight of a crown that has never rested easy on his brow. How long do we have? He asks Jon Arryn, who enters the chamber with arms full of dispatches. Stannis estimates 3 days if the winds hold, the aging hand replies. His 72 years show in every line of his weathered face, but his mind remains sharp as a maester's blade. The royal fleet is moving to intercept, but they're outnumbered 2 to 1. Robert nods grimly. The years of reduced income since Tywin's execution have taken their toll on the Royal Navy. Where once Lannister gold maintained the finest ships in the 7 kingdoms, now Robert makes do with fewer vessels and older hulls. Send the ravens, Robert commands. Call the banners. Every lord who swore fealty to the Iron Throne. Tell them the realm is in danger. In the Red Keep's Raven Tower, maesters work frantically to dispatch the king's summons. Black Wings carry urgent messages across the 7 kingdoms, to Storm's End, to River Run, to the Eyrie. But most importantly, north to Winterfell, where Robert's oldest ally awaits the call to arms. Ned Stark receives the Raven while breaking his fast in Winterfell's Great Hall. His wife Catelyn watches his face darken as he reads Robert's message, and she knows without words that war has come to their peaceful world. How many men? She asks quietly. Every sword we can muster, Ned replies, rising from the table. 20,000 Northmen will march south within the fortnight. At the high table, Jon Snow looks up from his porridge with eyes that burn with barely contained excitement. At 14, he has grown tall and strong, with the dark hair of his acknowledged father and the grey eyes of the North. Unlike his counterpart in another timeline, this Jon has never known the shame of bastardy. He is Ned Stark's son in name and truth, trained in arms and leadership as befits his station. "Father," Jon says, his voice cracking slightly with adolescent eagerness, "let me ride with you. I'm old enough. Robb and I have trained together since we could hold swords." Ned's face softens as he looks at his boys. Jon and Robb, both 14 now, sit side by side with the easy familiarity of true brothers. In this world, no shadow of illegitimacy has ever come between them. "This is not a tourney, Jon," Ned says gently. "This is war. Men die in war." "Men die in peace, too," Jon replies with the stark wisdom that marks all Starks. "But they don't die for anything that matters." Robb nods agreement with his brother. "We're not children anymore, Father. We know what war means." Catelyn's heart clenches as she looks at her sons, so eager to prove themselves in battle. But she also sees the steel in their eyes, the northern strength that has sustained House Stark for 8,000 years. Meanwhile, in the Westerlands, the realm's newest lords face a crisis that exposes the weakness of Robert's justice. Lord Adam Marbrand, granted Casterly Rock after Tywin's execution, stands on the battlements of his adopted seat and watches smoke rise from 3 different directions. "How many this time?" he asks his captain of guards. "The Crakehall lordship burns," the man reports grimly, "and word comes that Lord Lyddon's son has declared for the Pretender, says his family's ancestral right supersedes royal appointment." Marbrand's jaw tightens. He has ruled fairly these 15 years, but he rules over men whose hearts still belong to the Golden Lions. When faced with a choice between the appointed lord who serves the crown and the exiled heirs who share their blood, too many choose blood. "Send word to King's Landing," Marbrand commands. "The Westerlands cannot be counted upon. Half our lords will turn their cloaks the moment Cersei Lannister sets foot on Westerosi soil." In King's Landing, Tywin Lannister paces his chambers like a caged wolf, his mind torn between loyalties that should never conflict. At 22, he has grown into his role as the crown's most trusted advisor, his wit and wisdom compensating for what his body lacks in stature. But now his siblings sail toward the city he has learned to call home, and he must choose between blood and honor. A knock at his door interrupts his brooding. Queen Jorah enters without ceremony, her northern practicality showing in her simple dress and unadorned hair. At 36, she remains a handsome woman, though the years of queenship have etched lines of worry around her grey eyes. "You're troubled," she observes, settling into a chair across from him. "My sister comes with fire and blood," Tyrion replies quietly, "and I find myself hoping she fails." "That shows wisdom, not treachery," the Queen says. "You've seen what peace can build. Would you truly trade it for revenge?" Tyrion moves to the window overlooking Blackwater Bay. In the distance, he can see the dark shapes of Stannis' fleet forming up for battle. Somewhere beyond the horizon, his siblings approach with an army at their backs and death in their hearts. "I loved them once," he admits. "Despite everything, I loved them." "Love and loyalty are different things," Queen Jorah observes. "You can mourn what they were while opposing what they've become." On the waters of Blackwater Bay, the 2 fleets sight each other as the sun reaches its zenith. Stannis Baratheon stands on the deck of his flagship, the Fury, and studies the approaching enemy through a Myrish lens. The Golden Company's galleys fly banners he has not seen in 15 years. The Golden Lion rampant on crimson field. "Signal the fleet," Stannis commands. His voice carries the authority of a man who has never known defeat on the water. "Battle line formation. We'll meet them head-on." The Royal Fleet numbers 25 war galleys, but they are manned by seasoned crews who have kept the peace on these waters for over a decade. The Golden Company has more ships, but their sellsword captains lack the discipline of royal naval officers. There, Stannis says, pointing to the largest galley in the enemy formation. The flagship with the golden figurehead. That's where she'll be. Across the water, Cersei Lannister stands on the deck of her flagship, the Golden Queen, and watches the royal fleet approach. At 28, she has grown into a woman of terrible beauty and cold ambition. Her golden hair streams in the salt wind, and her green eyes burn with 15 years of accumulated rage. Beside her, Jaime adjusts his armor and tests the weight of his sword. At 31, exile has hardened him into something more dangerous than the knight who once guarded kings. His golden hair is longer now, tied back with leather, and scars mark his face from countless battles in the disputed lands. Remember, Cersei says, as the fleets close to battle range, Stannis is mine. I want him taken alive, if possible. And if he won't surrender, then he dies with the rest of them, Cersei replies coldly. But I would prefer to see Robert Baratheon's brother kneel before me. The first arrows fly as the ships close to within 200 yards. Royal archers, trained in the long tradition of the Storm Kings, send volleys of cloth-yard shafts into the Golden Company ranks. Sellsword crossbowmen reply with iron quarrels that punch through mail and flesh with equal ease. Stannis' fury rams the first Golden Company galley with the grinding crash of splintered wood and screaming men. Royal Marines board the enemy vessel with boarding axes and cutlasses, their disciplined advance cutting through the sellsword defenders like a blade through silk. But the numbers tell their tale. For every Golden Company ship that burns or sinks, 2 more take its place. The royal fleet fights with courage and skill, but courage cannot overcome mathematics forever. On shore, thousands of small folk line the docks and beaches of King's Landing to watch the battle unfold. They see royal ships burning and Golden Company galleys pressing toward land, and fear spreads through the crowd like wildfire. The usurper's fleet breaks, someone shouts from the crowd. The true queen comes home. But others cry different words. Stand fast for Robert. Death to traitors and oath-breakers. The city teeters on the edge of riot as neighbor turns against neighbor, and the gold cloaks struggle to maintain order in the streets. In the Red Keep, Robert watches the battle from the battlements with a heart heavy as stone. Each burning ship represents hundreds of loyal men dying for his choices. He wonders, not for the first time, if executing Tywin Lannister was worth this price in blood. The fleet can't hold, he tells Ned, who has arrived from Winterfell with the first northern horsemen. Stannis fights well, but he's outnumbered. Then we make our stand on land, Ned replies grimly. The city has walls. The Red Keep has never fallen to assault. It has never faced the Golden Company, Robert observes. These are not Westerosi lords playing at war. These are men who fight for coin and glory, and they know no mercy. As the sun begins to set, the first Golden Company galleys reach the shore. Sellswords leap into the surf with weapons raised, their war cries echoing across the water in a dozen different tongues. They plant golden banners in the sand and begin forming up for the march on King's Landing. Cersei Lannister sets foot on Westerosi soil for the first time in 15 years, and the earth seems to tremble beneath her feet. She kneels and kisses the sand, tears streaming down her face as 15 years of exile and hatred reach their culmination. I have returned, she whispers to the wind, and I will have my vengeance. Behind her, 12,000 sellswords begin their march toward the city that cast them out. The war Robert Baratheon created through his choices has finally come home to roost, and the realm will never be the same. In the gathering darkness, ravens carry word of the landing to every corner of the 7 kingdoms. The Golden Company has returned to Westeros, and the Game of Thrones enters its deadliest phase. Soon, the streets of King's Landing will run red with blood, and only one side will remain standing when the sun rises again. The price of justice, so long delayed, has finally come due. The great sept of Baelor burns as dawn breaks over King's Landing, its crystal dome cracking from the heat of wildfire that rages within its sacred walls. Cersei Lannister stands before the altar, where kings once knelt for blessing, while the High Septon places a crown of Myrish gold upon her golden hair. The sept's destruction serves as her coronation hall, and the screams of the dying provide her royal fanfare. I name you Cersei of House Lannister, first of her name, Queen of the Andals and the First Men, the terrified Septon proclaims, his voice barely audible over the crackling flames. Protector of the Seven Kingdoms. Long live the Queen! Roar the Golden Company sellswords who pack the burning sept. Their voices echo off shattered, stained glass and smoke-blackened stone as Cersei raises the crown toward the collapsing roof. Outside the sept, the city tears itself apart in three-way war. Robert's gold cloaks hold the Red Keep and the surrounding streets, their stag banners flying defiantly above the ancient fortress. Cersei's sellswords control Flea Bottom and the harbour, their golden lions painted on every wall they claim. But a third faction has emerged from the chaos, flying banners that few expected to see. Lord Renly Baratheon rides through the street of steel at the head of 5,000 men, his antlered helm gleaming in the morning sun. At 21, Robert's youngest brother has grown into a formidable knight, tall and strong with the Baratheon look but lacking Robert's brutish bulk. His forces are a mixture of Stormlanders who remember the old days and opportunistic lords seeking to back a winner. "For the true king!" Renly shouts as his cavalry charges into a group of Golden Company spearmen. His warhammer, lighter than his brother's but no less deadly, crushes skulls and shatters shields. "For House Baratheon!" The irony is lost on none who witness it. Robert's brother fights for his crown while claiming it for himself. Renly's banners show the crowned stag of his own design, neither Robert's royal version nor the original Storm King heraldry. This is ambition wrapped in the cloak of legitimacy. In the Red Keep's throne room, Robert Baratheon receives reports of his brother's betrayal with the stoicism of a man who has seen too much treachery. Around him, his remaining loyal lords cluster like wolves protecting their pack leader. Ned Stark stands at his right hand, his ice drawn and ready, while young Tyrion Lannister paces before the Iron Throne with scrolls of intelligence. Renly controls the Mudgate and most of the Street of Sisters, Tyrion reports, his young face showing strain beyond his 22 years. His proclamation was read this morning in 3 different squares. He claims Robert has grown weak, that the realm needs younger blood on the throne. "The insolent pup," Robert growls, his massive hands clenching the arms of the Iron Throne. "I raised him, fed him, gave him Storm's End, and this is how he repays me." "Family is complicated, Your Grace," Tyrion observes with bitter experience. "Blood means less than ambition when crowns are involved." Ned's grey eyes focus on the dwarf with interest. "You seem to know something of family betrayal, Lord Tyrion." Tyrion produces a leather portfolio from his robes and approaches the throne. "I know more than I wish about my own family's treachery, Lord Stark, which is why I can recognize it in others." He opens the portfolio to reveal a collection of letters. "Petter Baelish has been corresponding with my sister for months. These were found in his chambers after he fled the city last night." Robert leans forward to study the documents, his face darkening with each line he reads. Littlefinger's careful script details payments to corrupt gold cloaks, plans to open the King's Gate for Golden Company forces, and promises of rich rewards when Cersei takes the throne. "The snake," Robert spits. "How long has he been playing this game?" "Since before the invasion began, Your Grace. Perhaps longer." Tyrion's voice carries genuine regret. "He's been bleeding the royal treasury slowly, creating the very financial crisis he claimed to solve. Every loan from Braavos, every debt to Tiroshi merchants, all part of his plan to weaken your position." Outside the throne room, the sounds of battle grow closer. Steel rings on steel in the Red Keep's courtyards as Golden Company soldiers attempt to storm the walls. Their scaling ladders burn under a rain of pitch and arrows, but more keep coming. Meanwhile, at the Lion Gate, Jaime Lannister leads his cavalry in a charge that shatters the city's western defences. His golden armour gleams as he cuts down fleeing gold cloaks, his sword work as beautiful and deadly as a song. Behind him ride 1,000 knights sworn to his sister's cause, their lances lowered for the kill. "For Queen Cersei!" Jaime shouts as his destrier crashes through a line of spearmen. "For House Lannister!" The city watch breaks before his charge like wheat before a scythe. Men throw down their weapons and flee rather than face the returned exile who fights with 15 years of accumulated rage. Within the hour, the Golden Company controls the western districts of King's Landing. But resistance comes from an unexpected quarter. In the narrow streets near the Great Sept, Jon Snow and Robb Stark lead a mixed force of northern infantry and royal guards in desperate street fighting. At 14, both boys have grown tall and strong, their faces showing the grim determination that marks true warriors. "Shield wall!" Jon shouts as a group of sellswords charges their position. "Lock shields and hold the line!" The northern soldiers obey without question, their long spears creating a hedge of steel that stops the enemy advance cold. Jon moves behind the line with practiced ease, his sword darting out to exploit gaps in enemy armor. This is his first real battle, but he fights with the instincts of a born warrior. Robb anchors the left flank, his own blade weaving patterns of death among the sellsword ranks. The two boys work in perfect coordination, covering each other's flanks and calling out warnings when enemies try to flank their position. "There!" Robb points to a group of crossbowmen taking position on a nearby rooftop. "Jon, take half the men and clear that building. I'll hold here." Jon nods and leads 20 men in a charge through a narrow alley, their war cries echoing off the stone walls. The crossbowmen barely have time to loose one volley before northern steel reaches them. Jon's sword takes off a man's head with a single clean stroke, while his soldiers dispatch the rest with brutal efficiency. "Building secured," he calls down to his brother. "The crossbows are ours." From their position in the Red Keep, Ned Stark watches his sons through a Myrish lens and feels pride warring with terror in his chest. They fight like seasoned veterans despite their youth, but battle is a hungry god that devours the skilled and unskilled alike. "They're good boys," Robert observes, following Ned's gaze. "They fight like you did at the Trident." "They fight better than I did at their age," Ned replies grimly. "But that may not be enough. We're outnumbered 3-1. The situation grows more desperate by the hour. Reports flood in of entire districts falling to Cersei's forces, while Renly's men seize key strongpoints throughout the city. The gold cloaks, caught between 3 different claimants, begin deserting in groups rather than choose sides in a war they don't understand. In the Dragon Pit, Tyrion coordinates the Crown's intelligence network from a makeshift command post. Ravens fly constantly to and from the ancient dome, carrying messages to loyal lords throughout the 7 kingdoms. But many of those ravens return undelivered, their intended recipients either dead, fled, or turned to other causes. "Word from the Westerlands," one of his assistants reports. "Lord Marbrand writes that half his bannermen have declared for your sister. The other half sit in their castles and wait to see who wins." Tyrion nods wearily. This is what he expected, but hoped to avoid. The lords appointed by Robert lack the deep roots that bind men to their rightful lieges. When faced with a choice between appointed masters and blood-born leaders, too many choose blood. A messenger bursts into the command post, his royal livery torn and bloody. "My lord," he gasps, "the sept burns. Queen Cersei has crowned herself in the flames." "Clever," Tyrion murmurs, though his admiration is tinged with horror. "She makes herself seem like a phoenix rising from ashes. The symbolism will impress the small folk." But symbolism cannot win battles alone. As afternoon fades toward evening, The tide of war begins to turn against the crown. Golden Company discipline proves superior to the hasty defences Robert can muster, while Renly's forces attack royal positions from unexpected directions. The breakthrough comes at the King's Gate, where Jaime Lannister leads a final desperate charge against the Red Keep's outer defences. His cavalry crashes into the courtyard like a golden thunderbolt, scattering defenders and planting Lannister banners on the walls. "The gates are fallen," someone screams from the battlements. "They're in the Red Keep!" Robert rises from the Iron Throne, his warhammer in his hands and death in his eyes. Around him, his remaining loyalists prepare for a last stand that will echo through history. Ned draws ice, the great Valyrian steel sword singing as it tastes air. Young Tyrion hefts a crossbow despite his small stature, determined to defend the crown that gave him purpose. "Well, lads," Robert says with grim humour, "it seems we'll find out today whether justice can stand against gold and ambition." Outside the throne room, the sound of marching feet grows closer. Steel rings on stone as armed men advance through the Red Keep's corridors, their war cries echoing off ancient walls. 3 armies converge on the heart of the Seven Kingdoms' power, and only one can claim victory. In the streets beyond, Jon Snow and Robb Stark lead their surviving men in a fighting withdrawal toward the Red Keep. They leave a trail of enemy dead behind them, but their own ranks grow thinner with each street they abandon. The boys who rode south with dreams of glory now face the harsh reality of war's cost. "The Keep," Jon pants as they reach the outer walls. "We make our stand with father." "Together," Robb agrees, his sword dripping blood. "Whatever comes, we face it together." Behind them, King's Landing burns under 3 different banners, and the Game of Thrones reaches its bloodiest crescendo. The war Robert created through his moral choices has consumed the realm, and now it comes for him with fire and steel and the bitter taste of betrayal. The price of justice, so long in coming, demands payment in full. Steel rings on steel in the throne room of the Red Keep as 3 armies converge on the heart of power. Robert Baratheon stands before the Iron Throne with his warhammer in both hands, facing enemies who wear the faces of family. Blood drips from a dozen wounds, but the king's blue eyes burn with undiminished fury. Jaime Lannister advances up the steps with his sword gleaming in the torchlight. His golden armor bears fresh dents from the fighting in the corridors, and his handsome face shows a grim satisfaction that 15 years of exile have finally led to this moment. "Hello, Robert," Jaime says with cold courtesy. "You look older." "You look like a fool who should have stayed in Essos," Robert replies, hefting his hammer. "But I suppose we all make mistakes." Around them, the battle for the throne room rages in desperate pockets of violence. Golden Company sellswards clash with royal guards, while Renly's Stormlanders fight both sides with equal fury. The ancient hall echoes with the screams of dying men and the crash of steel on steel. Near the great doors, Prince Eddard Baratheon fights beside Jon Snow and Robb Stark in a scene that would have been impossible in any other timeline. At 12, the royal heir shows the black hair and blue eyes of his father, but his mother's northern practicality guides his sword arm. He moves with the fluid grace of trained nobility, his blade darting between the ribs of a Golden Company spearman. "Behind you!" Jon shouts, spinning to parry a blow aimed at the prince's back. At 14, Ned Stark's acknowledged son has grown into the warrior he was always meant to be, unburdened by the shame of bastardy. His sword work is clean and efficient, each strike meant to kill rather than wound. Robb covers their left flank, his own blade weaving death among their enemies. The future Lord of Winterfell fights with the cold fury that marks all Starks when their pack is threatened. These boys who grew up as brothers now stand together against the chaos that threatens to consume their world. "The prince!" someone screams from across the hall. "Protect the prince!" But Prince Eddard needs little protection. He ducks under a sellsword swing and drives his dagger between the man's ribs, his young face showing no emotion as his enemy falls. The boy who played with wooden toys 3 years ago now wields steel with deadly precision. On the throne room's dais, Robert and Jaime circle each other like wolves, preparing to fight over a kill. The king's hammer moves in great sweeping arcs that could crush a man's skull, while Jaime's sword darts like a striking snake, seeking gaps in Robert's armor. "You destroyed my family," Jaime says as he lunges forward, his blade scraping along Robert's breastplate. "Cost me everything I ever loved." "You destroyed yourselves," Robert replies, bringing his hammer down in an overhead strike that Jaime barely avoids. The weapon crashes into the stone steps, sending chips of rock flying like shrapnel. "I just made you pay the price." Their duel plays out above the larger battle, king and knight locked in personal combat, while armies die around them. Jaime's sword finds the gaps in Robert's armor, drawing blood from a dozen small wounds. But Robert's hammer only needs to connect once, and the king presses forward with the relentless fury that won him a crown. In the Tower of the Hand, Cersei Lannister stands among barrels of wildfire, with a torch in her trembling hand. The green substance glows with malevolent light, promising destruction on a scale that would dwarf even the Mad King's ambitions. Her golden hair falls loose around her shoulders, and madness gleams in her emerald eyes. "If I cannot rule, then no one shall," she whispers to the empty chamber. "Let King's Landing burn. Let them all burn." Tyrion bursts through the tower door with sweat streaming down his face, his crossbow forgotten in his desperate flight from the throne room. At 22, he has learned to recognize the particular gleam in his sister's eyes that means murder and madness. "Cersei, no," he pleads, holding up his hands. "Think of your son. Think of Joffrey." "I am thinking of him," she replies with cold certainty. "He will be remembered as the prince whose mother burned a city, rather than let usurpers claim his birthright." The torch wavers in her grip, and Tyrion sees his own death reflected in the dancing flame. The wildfire will consume half the city if she drops it, and his sister has never lacked for courage when destruction calls. Back in the throne room, the tide of battle begins to shift. Renly's forces press toward the Iron Throne from the south entrance, while Golden Company soldiers pour through the great doors. Robert's defenders fall back step by bloody step, their formation crumbling under the weight of numbers. "The walls are breached," someone shouts from the corridor. "They're coming through the walls." But the voice that answers carries the authority of the North, cold and implacable as winter itself. Not all of them. Ned Stark strides into the throne room with ice naked in his hands, the Valyrian steel blade singing its deadly song. Behind him march 2,000 Northmen, their grey cloaks soaked with rain and blood. They have fought their way through the city's streets to reach this moment, and their grim faces show the cost. "Father!" Jon and Robb cry together, their voices cutting through the din of battle. Ned's grey eyes find his sons fighting beside the royal prince, and pride wars with terror in his chest. They stand back to back against overwhelming odds, their swords red with enemy blood, and he sees the men they will become if they survive this day. "Northern steel!" Ned roars, raising ice above his head. "For the Starks! For the king!" The Northmen surge forward like a grey tide, their war cries echoing off the ancient stones. They crash into Renly's flank with the force of an avalanche, their long spears punching through southern armor and Stormlander pride alike. The three-way battle becomes chaos as northern intervention tips the balance. Renly's men find themselves caught between hammer and anvil, crushed between royal guards and northern steel. The youngest Baratheon fights with desperate courage, but ambition cannot stand against the loyalty that bonds the North to Robert's crown. On the dais, Robert and Jaime's duel reaches its climax. The knight's sword finds its mark, sliding between plates of armor to pierce the king's side. Robert staggers but doesn't fall, his hammer sweeping in a horizontal arc that catches Jaime across the ribs. Both men stagger, blood flowing freely from their wounds. Jaime's perfect features are marred by a cut across his cheek, while Robert's breathing comes in laboured gasps. But neither yields ground. "You should have stayed in Tirosh," Robert pants, raising his hammer for another strike. "I should have killed you 15 years ago," Jaime replies, lunging forward with his blade aimed at the king's throat. The strike never lands. Prince Eddard appears between the combatants like a ghost made flesh, his small sword deflecting Jaime's blade just enough to save his father's life. The boy moves with shocking speed, his dagger finding the gap between Jaime's armor plates. "For my father," the prince says, with deadly calm, as Jaime staggers backward, blood spreading across his golden surcoat. "For the crown." Jaime looks down at the blade protruding from his chest, then up at the 12-year-old boy who has dealt him a mortal wound. His handsome face shows surprise more than pain. "Well struck, little prince," he whispers, falling to his knees on the steps of the Iron Throne. "Your mother taught you well." In the Tower of the Hand, the torch slips from Cersei's nerveless fingers as she watches her twin brother die. The flame arcs through the air toward the barrels of wildfire, and Tyrion throws himself forward in a desperate leap. His small hands close around the torch just inches from the green substance. The flame burns his palm, but he holds tight and rolls away from the barrels, his heart hammering against his ribs. King's Landing will not burn today, not by his sister's madness. "No!" Cersei screams, lunging for another torch. "I will not be denied. I will not be forgotten." Tyrion tackles her around the legs, sending them both crashing to the floor. They roll among the wildfire barrels like children, fighting over a toy. But this game has stakes that could destroy a kingdom. In the throne room, the battle's end comes suddenly. With Jaime dead and the northern reinforcements cutting through their ranks, the Golden Company begins to break. Sellswards who fight for gold have little stomach for hopeless causes, and they stream toward the exits like water finding cracks in stone. Renly makes his last stand near the great doors, his antlered helm dented and his golden armor running red. He faces Ned Stark across a circle of corpses, both men breathing hard from the fight. "You could have been king," Ned observes, lowering ice for a moment. "Robert would have named you his heir if you had asked." "I am king," Renly replies with desperate pride. "I claimed the crown by right of strength." "You claimed nothing but a grave," Ned says sadly. "Yield, boy. Your brother might show you mercy." But Renly charges instead, his war hammer swinging in a wild arc that would have crushed Ned's skull. Ice moves like liquid lightning, and Renly Baratheon dies as he lived, young, proud, and foolish. The silence that follows is deafening after hours of battle. Robert slumps against the Iron Throne, his wounds bleeding freely but his crown still on his head. Around him, the throne room looks like a charnel house, littered with the dead of 3 armies. Prince Eddard kneels beside his father, his young hands trying to staunch the flow of blood from Robert's wounds. The boy's face shows the strain of becoming a man through violence, but his blue eyes remain steady. "I'm sorry, Papa," he whispers. "I couldn't stop him sooner." "You did well, lad," Robert replies, his voice growing weak. "Better than I did at your age. You saved your king and your kingdom today." Jon Snow and Robb Stark approach the throne with their weapons lowered, their faces showing the exhaustion that follows battle. They have fought together and bled together, and the bond between them is stronger than ever. "Is it over?" Jon asks quietly. Ned looks around the throne room, counting the cost of victory in the bodies of the dead. His sons live, the prince lives, and the king draws breath. But the price of justice has been paid in full, and the realm will never be the same. "It's over," he confirms, though his voice carries little satisfaction. The war is done. In the Tower of the Hand, Tyrion sits among the wildfire barrels with his unconscious sister in his arms. She breathes but doesn't wake, and perhaps that is a mercy. The woman who dreamed of burning King's Landing will face a different fate than the one she planned. Outside the Red Keep, the city begins to count its dead and rebuild what war has broken. The Game of Thrones has claimed another generation of players, but from their sacrifice comes the hope of something better. The children who entered the throne room as boys have emerged as men, and they will shape the realm that rises from the ashes of this terrible day. Smoke rises from King's Landing, like the breath of a dying dragon, carrying the stench of blood and burned dreams across the Seven Kingdoms. 3 days have passed since the Battle of the Red Keep, and the city counts its dead in the thousands. Entire districts lie in ruins, their streets choked with rubble, and the bodies of men who died for causes they barely understood. Robert Baratheon lies in the royal chambers, his massive frame dwarfed by bandages and the weight of victory's cost. The king's wounds refuse to heal properly, and Maester Pycelle speaks in hushed tones of infection and failing organs. At 35, Robert has survived more battles than most men see in a lifetime, but this one may finally claim him. "The reports, Your Grace," Jon Arryn says, as he enters the chamber with arms full of Raven's messages. The aging hand looks older than his 72 years, his face showing the strain of governing a kingdom that teeters on the edge of collapse. Robert turns his head on the pillow, his blue eyes still bright despite his body's weakness. "Tell me the worst first, old friend. I've never been one for pleasant lies." "The crown's treasury is empty," Jon Arryn begins, settling into a chair beside the bed. "The war consumed what little gold we had left, and the destruction of the city's trade districts means no revenue for months to come." The king nods grimly. This is what he expected, but hoped to avoid. 15 years of ruling without Lannister gold have left the crown perpetually in debt, and war has broken what remained of the realm's finances. "The Iron Bank of Braavos demands payment of our outstanding loans," Jon Arryn continues. 47 million golden dragons due within the year. "If we cannot pay, they'll fund our enemies," Robert finishes. "Just as they did to Aegon the Unworthy. How much can we raise?" "Perhaps 10 million, if we tax every lord in the Seven Kingdoms to the bone. But that would likely trigger more rebellions." In the Tower of the Hand, Tyrion Lannister sits among ledgers and correspondence, his young face showing grief older than his 22 years. The dwarf has worked tirelessly since the battle's end, coordinating relief efforts and managing the kingdom's desperate finances. But his efficiency cannot mask the hollow look in his mismatched eyes. A servant enters with wine and simple fare, setting the tray on a desk already cluttered with the detritus of governance. Tyrion barely acknowledges the food, his attention focused on a letter bearing his family's broken seal. "Word from Casterly Rock, my lord," the servant reports quietly. "Sir Kevan writes that your sister's son has been found." Tyrion looks up sharply. "Prince Joffrey?" "Aye, my lord. He was hidden in Tyrosh during the battle. 10 years old, they say, and the very image of his mother." The news hits Tyrion like a physical blow. Somewhere across the narrow sea, his nephew lives on, the last remnant of Cersei's ambitions and Jaime's love. The boy carries Lannister blood, but will grow up knowing only exile and the bitter taste of defeat. "Have him brought to King's Landing," Tyrion decides after a long moment. "He's just a child. Whatever his parents did, he deserves better than growing up among sellswords and exile." In the black cells beneath the Red Keep, Cersei Lannister sits in darkness and contemplates the ruin of everything she held dear. The woman who once dreamed of burning King's Landing to ash now wears the grey robes of a prisoner, her golden hair shorn short in the manner of condemned traitors. The sound of boots on stone announces a visitor. Robert Baratheon enters the cell, leaning heavily on a walking stick, his face pale but determined. The king and his greatest enemy face each other across 15 years of hatred and the fresh graves of their war. "Hello, Cersei," Robert says, settling onto a wooden stool with visible effort. "You look different. I look defeated, she replies with bitter honesty. Something I never thought possible when I sailed from Tyrosh. Jaime is dead, Robert states without preamble. Died fighting like a knight, if that means anything to you. Cersei's composure finally breaks. Tears stream down her face as she mourns the twin who was her other half, the knight who loved her beyond reason or honor. He should have stayed in Essos. He should have lived. We all should have made different choices, Robert observes quietly. But we are where we are. They sit in silence for a long moment, king and prisoner united in their exhaustion. The great game that began with Tywin Lannister's execution has claimed another generation of players, leaving only grief and ashes in its wake. What happens now? Cersei asks finally. Now you face trial for treason, Robert replies, as your father did 15 years ago. The wheel keeps turning. In Winterfell's Godswood, Ned Stark kneels before the heart tree and contemplates the price of justice. The ancient weirwood's red eyes seem to judge him as he prays for guidance, its carved face showing the same stern expression that has watched over his family for centuries. His sons found him here an hour ago, both boys still bearing the marks of their first real battle. Jon and Robb have grown up fast in the past few days, their childhood ending in the throne room where they stood over the bodies of enemies and allies alike. "Father," Robb had said quietly, "was it worth it? All the death, all the blood. Did we achieve anything?" Ned had no easy answer for his heir. They had preserved Robert's crown and prevented Cersei from burning up the city, but the cost seemed to grow heavier with each passing hour. The realm lay in ruins, its finances shattered, and its people traumatized by civil war. "We chose justice over expedience," he had replied finally. "Whether that was wisdom or folly, history will decide." Now, alone with his thoughts and his gods, Ned wonders if there was another path. Could they have found a way to hold Tywin accountable without triggering 15 years of instability? Could justice have been served without drowning the realm in blood? The Heart Tree offers no answers, only the silent judgment of ages. In King's Landing, Prince Eddard Baratheon stands on the battlements of the Red Keep and surveys his damaged kingdom. At 12 years old, he carries responsibilities that would break grown men, but his mother's northern strength sustains him through the darkest hours. "The estimates, Your Grace," Lord Commander Barristan Selmy reports, as he joins the young prince on the walls. The old knight's white cloak is stained with soot and blood, but his bearing remains as proud as ever. "Tell me," Eddard says, with the gravity of someone far older than his years. 6,000 dead in the city, perhaps twice that wounded. The Sept of Baelor will need to be rebuilt entirely, and half the shops on the Street of Steel are rubble. The prince nods solemnly. He has seen the cost of war firsthand, felt the weight of taking a life when he drove his blade into Jaime Lannister's chest. The memory will haunt him for years to come. But it has also forged him into something harder than the boy who played with wooden swords. "And my father?" Sir Barristan's weathered face shows carefully controlled emotion. "Maester Pycelle says he grows weaker each day. The wounds were too severe, and infection has set in." The words hang in the air like a death sentence. Prince Eddard knows what they mean. Soon, perhaps very soon, he will be king. The crown that his father won through rebellion and held through justice will pass to him, along with all its burdens. "I need to see him," the prince decides. In the royal chambers, Robert watches his son approach the bed with pride and sorrow warring in his chest. The boy moves with the careful dignity of someone who has learned that every action carries consequences. Every word might be remembered by history. "Papa," Prince Eddard says simply, taking his father's hand. "My son," Robert replies, his voice growing weaker. "My heir. Are you ready for what comes next?" The prince considers the question with the seriousness it deserves. He thinks of the throne room, littered with bodies, of the city burning beyond the Red Keep's walls, of the weight of decisions that shape kingdoms and destroy lives. No, he answers honestly, but I'll learn. Robert smiles at his son's honesty. Good. The moment you think you're ready to be king, you've stopped paying attention to the cost. Outside the royal chambers, the kingdom waits for news that will shape its future. Lords gather in the throne room to discuss succession and stability, while common folk rebuild their lives from the wreckage of civil war. Tyrion works tirelessly to coordinate relief efforts, his grief channeled into the practical work of governance. He has lost his siblings, but found his purpose, and perhaps that is enough to sustain him through the dark days ahead. Jon Arryn struggles with ledgers that show a crown drowning in debt, while ravens carry word of the battle's outcome to every corner of the realm. Some lords will celebrate Robert's victory, others will mourn Cersei's defeat. But all will wonder what comes next. In the Sept of Remembrance, built hastily from the ruins of Baela's great temple, the small folk pray for their dead and their uncertain future. They light candles for sons who died in someone else's war, and daughters who lost their homes to someone else's ambition. The Game of Thrones has claimed another generation of players, but the wheel keeps turning. Soon, new players will take the stage, and the same deadly game will begin again with different faces and familiar stakes. Robert Baratheon chose justice 15 years ago, and that choice has shaped a kingdom. Whether it saved the realm or doomed it remains to be seen, but the price has been paid in full, in blood and gold, in broken lives and shattered dreams, in the endless cost of trying to do right in a world that rewards the ruthless and punishes the noble. The reckoning is complete, but the consequences will echo through generations yet to come. Spring arrives early in King's Landing, bringing with it the promise of renewal after the harsh winter of war. The city's wounds heal, slowly but surely, as merchants return to rebuild their shops and craftsmen clear rubble from the streets. In the Red Keep, King Robert Baratheon walks the battlements with careful steps, his body still bearing the scars of battle, but his spirit renewed by survival and duty. "The reports from the north, Your Grace," Prince Eddard says as he joins his father on the walls. At 13, the heir to the Iron Throne has grown tall and serious, his black hair catching the morning light as he studies a scroll bearing the direwolf seal of House Stark. Robert takes the parchment with hands that shake slightly, a reminder of how close death came during the war. What does Ned say about his son's betrothal? Lord Stark writes that the match is agreed upon, Prince Eddard reports. Robb Stark will wed Margaery Tyrell within the year. The Reach offers grain and gold in exchange for northern trade agreements, and both houses gain from the alliance. The king nods approvingly. The realm needs stability, and marriages between great houses provide the foundation for lasting peace. But there is more to this alliance than grain and gold. It represents a new balance of power, where the North stands as equal partner rather than subject kingdom. "And the other matter?" Robert asks quietly. "Jon Snow will be officially legitimized as Jon Stark at the wedding feast," Prince Eddard continues. "Lord Stark writes that his son has more than earned the right to bear the family name without shadow or shame." In the throne room below, Tyrion Lannister sits at the Hand's table and reviews the morning's petitions with the efficiency that has made him indispensable to the crown. At 23, he has grown into his role as the realm's chief administrator, his wit and wisdom compensating for what his body lacks in stature. The golden handpin on his doublet gleams in the torchlight, a symbol of trust earned through loyalty and competence. "The petition from House Crakehall," his secretary announces, setting another scroll before the new Hand. Tyrion breaks the seal and scans the contents with practiced speed. "They request royal pardon for their support of my sister during the war, offering to surrender half their lands in compensation." "Your recommendation, my lord?" "Mercy," Tyrion decides after a moment's thought. The realm needs lords who can govern, not more empty castles. Grant the pardon, but require their eldest son as a ward in King's Landing. Loyalty must be taught to the next generation. This has become the pattern of reconstruction, former enemies integrated into the new order through bonds of marriage, fosterage, and mutual benefit. The old system of rule through fear and gold has given way to something more complex, built on the hard-won understanding that stability requires willing cooperation rather than grudging submission. In Winterfell's great hall, the Stark children gather for their morning lessons with Maester Luwin, their voices echoing off ancient stones as they recite the histories and laws that will guide them in the years to come. Sansa, now 12 and beautiful like her mother, studies the genealogies of great houses with the attention of someone who understands that knowledge is power. "Tell me about House Tyrell," Maester Luwin instructs. "Lords paramount of the Reach," Sansa recites precisely. "Their words are growing strong, and their seat is Highgarden. Lady Margaery is their only daughter, 16 years old, and considered one of the most beautiful maidens in the Seven Kingdoms." Beside her, 10-year-old Arya rolls her eyes at her sister's interest in beauty and marriages. The younger Stark daughter has little patience for lessons about courtly manners, preferring the practical education she receives from Ser Roderick in the training yards. "Why does Robb have to marry her?" Arya asks with the bluntness that marks all her conversations. "Can't he just be friends with the Reach Lords?" "Marriage is how great houses build alliances," Maester Luwin explains patiently. "Your brother's wedding will secure peace and prosperity for the North for generations to come." In the corner of the hall, 8-year-old Bran Stark sits quietly with his own books, but his attention wanders to the carved direwolves on the walls. Lately the boy has been troubled by strange dreams, visions of three-eyed ravens and ancient trees that seem more real than waking life. He speaks little of these dreams, but those who know him see the change in his grey eyes. "Brandon," Maester Luwin calls gently, "can you tell us about the rebuilding of the Westerlands?" Bran blinks and focuses on the lesson with effort. King Robert has granted Casterly Rock to House Marbrand, but new lordships have been created for loyal houses. The Banefort goes to a cadet branch of House Stark, and Lannisport will be ruled by a council of merchants rather than a single lord. The Maester nods approvingly. The boy has absorbed more than his quiet demeanor suggests, understanding the complex political restructuring that follows in war's wake. Meanwhile, in the Red Keep's rebuilt sept, 4-year-old Rickon Stark explores the gardens with the fearless curiosity of a child who has never known war. His nursemaid follows at a respectful distance as he chases butterflies among the roses, his laughter a reminder that innocence can survive even the darkest times. "Careful, little lord," the woman warns as Rickon climbs onto a stone bench. "Your father would have my head if you fell." But Rickon only grins with the wild confidence that marks the youngest Stark. He has grown up hearing stories of his older brother's heroic deeds in battle, and he dreams of his own adventures to come. In King's Landing's harbour, ships arrive daily carrying goods and visitors from across the known world. The Golden Company's invasion damaged much of the city's trade infrastructure, but merchants are quick to adapt when profit calls. New warehouses rise from the ashes of the old, and foreign gold flows into the royal treasury for the first time in years. Tyrion watches this renewal from his solar window, a cup of Dornish wine in his hand and satisfaction in his mismatched eyes. The ledgers on his desk show the kingdom's finances slowly improving, though it will take years to fully recover from the war's cost. A knock on the door interrupts his contemplation. Prince Eddard enters without ceremony, carrying himself with the easy confidence that comes from acknowledged authority. "Lord Tyrion," the prince says formally, though his eyes show genuine warmth. "I wanted to thank you for your work on the trade agreements with Braavos. The Iron Bank has agreed to restructure our debt at more favorable terms." "Your Grace does me too much honor," Tyrion replies with a slight bow. "I serve at the pleasure of the crown." "You serve the realm," Prince Eddard corrects gently. And you do it better than most men who were born to the task. The praise means more to Tyrion than the young prince might realize. For years the dwarf has struggled to prove his worth in a world that judges by appearance rather than ability. To be recognized as essential to the kingdom's recovery validates everything he has worked to achieve. There is another matter, Prince Eddard continues. Father wishes to discuss the succession laws. Tyrion sets down his wine cup with careful precision. Oh? The war taught us hard lessons about the fragility of dynasties. Father wants to codify the succession to prevent future disputes. The prince's voice carries the weight of someone far older than his 13 years. He also wishes to formalize the North's status as an autonomous kingdom under the Iron Throne. This is the heart of the new order taking shape, not the centralized tyranny that the Targaryens built with dragons and fear, but a confederation of kingdoms bound by mutual interest and respect. The North will rule itself while remaining part of the realm, a compromise that satisfies honor while maintaining unity. A wise policy, Tyrion observes. What of the other kingdoms? Each will have a voice in the new Great Council that advises the crown. Lords paramount will govern their own lands with minimal interference from King's Landing. Prince Eddard's smile shows genuine enthusiasm for this vision. Father believes that willing cooperation serves better than forced submission. In the Godswood of the Red Keep, a heart tree has been planted at Queen Jorah's request, the first weirwood to grow in the south in centuries. The sapling is small and fragile, but its red leaves catch the afternoon light like drops of blood, a reminder that the old ways have not been forgotten. Jon Snow and Robb Stark often come here to pray and plan, their friendship strengthened by the battles they fought together. At 14, both boys stand on the threshold of manhood, their voices deeper and their faces showing the first hints of the men they will become. The legitimization ceremony will be held in Winterfell's Godswood, Robb tells his brother as they kneel before the young tree. Father says the old gods should witness what the new world makes official. Jon nods, his grey eyes reflecting deep emotion. I never dared hope for this. To carry the Stark name without shame, to be your true brother-in-law as well as love. You were always my brother, Robb replies firmly. The rest is just ceremony. But they both know it is more than ceremony. Jon's legitimization removes a potential source of conflict from their futures, ensuring that when Robb inherits Winterfell, no shadow of bastardy will complicate the succession. As evening falls over King's Landing, the royal family gathers for their evening meal in the small solar rather than the great hall. Robert, though still weak from his wounds, presides over the table with quiet dignity, while Queen Jorah ensures their son receives both royal education and northern practicality. Tell me about your lessons with Lord Tyrion, Robert asks Prince Eddard, as they share simple fare, bread, meat, and ale in the northern fashion. He teaches me that ruling is like managing a merchant's ledger, the prince replies thoughtfully. Every decision has costs and benefits, and a wise king counts both before acting. And what have you learned about justice? Queen Jorah asks, her grey eyes serious. Prince Eddard considers the question with the gravity it deserves. That justice without mercy is cruelty, but mercy without justice is weakness. A king must find the balance between them. Robert exchanges a meaningful look with his wife. Their son speaks wisdom that took them years of painful experience to learn. Perhaps the next generation will rule more wisely than their fathers, guided by lessons written in blood and paid for with tears. Outside the Red Keep, King's Landing settles into the peaceful routine of a city at peace. Merchants close their shops, guards take their positions on the walls, and families gather around their hearths to share the day's events. The scars of war remain, but new growth springs from old wounds. In the distance, ships sail toward Old Town and Lannisport, carrying goods and messages that will bind the realm together through trade and communication. The Game of Thrones continues, but with different rules: cooperation instead of conquest, integration instead of domination. The children who fought in the war are becoming the leaders who will shape the peace, and their choices will echo through generations yet to come. Whether they prove wiser than their fathers remains to be seen. But they begin their reign with advantages their predecessors lacked, the hard-won knowledge that justice and mercy must walk hand in hand, and that true strength comes from willing cooperation rather than fearful submission. The new generation rises, and with it comes hope for a realm that has paid the price of learning wisdom through suffering. The ravens arrive at dawn, their black wings cutting through the morning mist that clings to the Red Keep's towers like memories of the dead. Robert Baratheon stands at the great window of his solar, reading the reports that shape his kingdom's future with hands that shake more each passing day. At 35, the king looks older than his years, his black hair streaked with silver and his massive frame showing the toll of 15 years spent balancing justice with pragmatism. "Disturbing news from the wall, Your Grace," Tywin Lannister reports as he enters the chamber, his arms full of Raven's messages. The hand of the king has grown into his role completely, his wit and wisdom making him indispensable to the crown's daily governance. At 23, he carries himself with quiet authority that commands respect throughout the Seven Kingdoms. Robert nods wearily. The reports from Castle Black speak of wildling raids growing bolder, of strange lights in the northern sky, and of Night's Watch brothers disappearing beyond the wall. These troubles feel distant from King's Landing's daily concerns, but they gnaw at the king's consciousness like old wounds that refuse to heal. "What does Jon Snow write?" Robert asks, settling into his chair with the careful movements of a man whose body bears the scars of too many battles. "He requests permission to lead a ranging beyond the wall," Tyrion replies, unrolling a parchment bearing the direwolf seal. "Lord Commander Mormont believes the wildlings are fleeing from something, not simply raiding for supplies. Jon Snow, now 14 and legitimized as Jon Stark, serves the Night's Watch with the same honor that marks all his family's service. His letters from the wall speak of duty and dedication, but also of growing concerns about threats that few men in the South take seriously." Meanwhile, in Winterfell's great hall, Robb Stark sits in his father's chair and receives his own morning reports. At 14, the young Lord of Winterfell has grown into his role with the steady competence that marks great leaders. His marriage to Margaery Tyrell has strengthened the North's position immeasurably, bringing Reach Gold to fund northern development and southern connections to balance eastern threats. "The harvest reports, my lord," Maester Luwin announces, setting scrolls before the young lord. "The best yields in living memory. Your trade agreements with the Reach have transformed the North's economy." Robb nods with satisfaction. The autonomous kingdom his father negotiated has prospered under his leadership, but success brings its own challenges. Wealthy neighbors often attract unwanted attention from those who remember older claims and nursing ancient grudges. In the rebuilt Sept of Baelor, Prince Eddard Baratheon kneels before the altar and prays for guidance as he prepares to inherit his father's crown. At 13, he understands that kingship will come to him soon. Robert's health grows weaker each month, and the wounds from the war never fully healed. The prince has spent years learning statecraft from Tyrion and honor from his mother, but he knows that no amount of preparation can fully ready a man for the crown's weight. "Your Grace," Sir Barristan Selmy approaches with respectful concern. "The king requests your presence in his chambers." Prince Eddard rises from his prayers and follows the Lord Commander through corridors that have seen too much bloodshed in recent years. The Red Keep bears scars from the war just as its inhabitants do, but it remains the seat of justice and the heart of the realm. In the royal chambers, Robert lies propped against pillows that cannot ease the pain in his chest. The king's blue eyes remain bright despite his body's weakness, and he smiles when his son enters the room. "My heir," Robert says, his voice softer than the commanding roar that once echoed through throne rooms. "Sit with me, lad. We need to talk about the future." Prince Eddard takes the chair beside his father's bed, his young face showing the gravity that marks all his conversations. "Father, the Meisters say you're improving." "The Meisters say many things," Robert replies with dry humor. "But my body tells a different story. The wounds from the war run deeper than steel, boy. They've been killing me slowly for months." The admission hangs heavy in the air between them. Both know this conversation has been coming, but speaking the truth aloud makes it real in ways that silence could not. "Tell me what you've learned," Robert continues, "about ruling, about justice, about the choices that shape kingdoms." Prince Eddard considers the question with the seriousness it deserves. "I've learned that every choice has consequences, and that sometimes doing right costs more than doing wrong. But the cost of doing wrong is always greater in the end, even when it's not immediately obvious." Robert smiles at his son's wisdom. "Good. What else?" "That gold and fear make weak foundations for a kingdom, but honor and justice create loyalty that lasts generations." The prince's voice carries conviction, born of observation and education. "The lords who serve us now do so willingly, not because they fear the headsman's axe." In the Westerlands, the truth of that observation plays out daily. Lord Adam Marbrand rules Casterly Rock with fair justice and practical wisdom, his authority accepted by lords who once served the Lannisters with grudging fear. The new houses established after the war have brought fresh blood to old lands, creating stability through merit rather than birth. The gold mines produce less than they did under Tywin's brutal efficiency, but the workers labor willingly for fair wages rather than under the threat of violence. The Westerlands have learned to prosper through cooperation rather than exploitation. At Winterfell, Sansa Stark practices her harp in the Solar, while her younger siblings pursue their own education. At 12, she has grown into a beauty that rivals her mother's, but she possesses a practical wisdom that courtly songs rarely celebrate. The girl who might have dreamed of southern knights and golden princes in another timeline instead studies trade agreements and diplomatic correspondence. "The letter from Braavos, my lady," her scepter announces, bringing news from the Iron Bank. They congratulate Lord Robb on the successful wheat exports and inquire about expanding the agreements to include iron and timber. Sansa reads the letter with the attention of someone who understands that prosperity requires constant work and careful management. The North's newfound wealth comes not from conquest or exploitation, but from honest trade and fair dealing. In the training yards below, 10-year-old Arya Stark practices her sword work with the dedication that marks all her pursuits. The girl who plays with steel instead of dolls shows no interest in the traditional female accomplishments, but her family accepts her choices with the tolerance that prosperity allows. "Well struck, little wolf," Sir Roderick calls as Arya lands a clean hit on her practice partner. "Your father would be proud." But Arya's grey eyes hold shadows that her youth cannot explain. Like her brother Bran, she sometimes speaks of strange dreams and distant visions. The children of this generation seem touched by forces that their parents cannot fully understand. In his chambers in the Red Keep, 8-year-old Bran Stark sits with his books and charts, his young mind grappling with mysteries that stretch beyond the known world. His dreams grow stronger each passing month, visions of White Walkers and ancient powers that stir beyond the wall. "The old stories speak of a long night," he tells Maester Pycelle during one of their lessons, "a time when darkness covered the world and the dead walked among the living." The old Maester dismisses such tales as legend and superstition, but Bran's grey eyes hold knowledge that no 8-year-old should possess. The boy sees truths that adults refuse to acknowledge, understanding that the real Game of Thrones involves forces far older and more dangerous than ambitious lords and disputed successions. 4-year-old Rickon Stark plays in Winterfell's gardens with the wild energy that marks the youngest Stark. He shows little interest in his older siblings' serious pursuits, preferring to chase butterflies and climb trees with reckless abandon. But even his innocent games sometimes take strange turns. He speaks to dogs and birds as if they answer back, and he draws pictures of ice and fire that make no sense to adult eyes. As evening falls over King's Landing, Robert summons his oldest friends for what they all know will be their final council together. Ned Stark has travelled south from Winterfell, his weathered face showing the strain of governing a kingdom while raising children who face challenges he cannot fully comprehend. "My friends," Robert says as they gather in his chambers, "we've come to the end of our story, and it's time to write the final pages." Jon Arryn, now 72 and frail but still sharp of mind, settles into his accustomed place at Robert's right hand. Tyrion takes the chair that has become his through years of faithful service. Ned stands beside the window, his grey eyes reflecting the weight of choices made and consequences faced. 15 years ago, I chose justice over gold, Robert continues. I executed Tywin Lannister and set in motion everything that followed. The question is, was it worth the price? The room falls silent as each man considers the question that has shaped their lives and their kingdom. The war, the deaths, the financial struggles, the political upheaval, all of it flows from that single choice made in a moment of moral clarity. "The realm is poorer in gold but richer in honor," Ned observes finally. "Our children grow up in a world where justice matters more than wealth, where cooperation builds stronger foundations than fear. The Lords serve willingly rather than from terror," Jon Arryn adds. "That loyalty will outlast any treasure hoard." Tyrion speaks last, his voice carrying the weight of personal experience. "My father ruled through fear and died friendless and alone. You ruled through justice and die surrounded by those who love you. That difference matters more than gold." Robert smiles at his friend's words, but his expression grows serious as he considers the challenges ahead. New threats are coming. The reports from the Wall speak of dangers we've ignored too long. My son will face trials that make our struggles look simple. "He'll be ready," Ned assures his foster brother. "We've taught him well." "All our children will be ready," Robert replies. "They've learned from our mistakes and built upon our successes. The realm we leave them is stronger than the one we inherited." As dawn breaks over King's Landing, Robert Baratheon draws his final breath, surrounded by the friends who shared his journey and the son who will carry on his legacy. The king who chose justice over gold dies as he lived, honest, honorable, and surrounded by loyalty freely given. Prince Eddard kneels beside his father's bed and accepts the crown that has waited for him since birth. At 13, he becomes the youngest king in the Seven Kingdoms' history, but he does not rule alone. The institutions his father built and the alliances his family forged provide the foundation for stable governance. In the throne room, the lords of the Seven Kingdoms kneel before their new king and swear the oaths that bind realm and crown together. These are not the fearful submissions that tyrants demand, but the willing pledges that free men give to leaders they respect. "Long live King Eddard," they cry, their voices echoing off ancient stones. "First of his name." The boy king accepts their homage with the gravity that marks all his actions, but his blue eyes show the determination that will guide his reign. He has learned that moral choices echo through generations, and he carries that knowledge like a sacred trust. Outside the Red Keep, the city celebrates its new king while mourning the old. Robert Baratheon's funeral pyre burns on Aegon's Hill, the flames carrying his spirit to whatever afterlife awaits those who choose honor over expedience. In Winterfell, Jon Snow receives word of Robert's death and his brother's coronation with mixed emotions. The Night's Watch allows no man to inherit titles or claim crowns, but he feels pride in his family's continued rise and determination to defend the realm they've built. The White Ravens arrive the next day, proclaiming winter's approach and the challenges it will bring. But the realm that faces the coming darkness is stronger than the one that existed 15 years ago. its foundations built on justice rather than fear, its unity forged through cooperation rather than conquest. The Game of Thrones continues, but the rules have changed. The children who inherit power understand that moral choices matter, that honor provides stronger foundations than gold, and that the price of doing right is always worth paying. As the sun sets over the Seven Kingdoms, ravens carry news of the new king's first decrees throughout the realm. Justice will continue to matter more than wealth. Honor will guide policy more than expedience. The legacy of Robert's choice 15 years ago will shape the kingdom for generations to come. The wheel of time turns, but it turns toward hope rather than despair, toward cooperation rather than conquest, toward a future where moral choices echo through eternity, and the price of justice is gladly paid by those who understand its true value. That's our theory. Westeros is a land filled with exciting stories and possibilities, and we love exploring them. If you want to accompany us on this journey across the Seven Kingdoms and beyond, then please like, share, and subscribe to our channel.